Chapter 1. Cheer! 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 In a large arena, sounds of cheers could be heard coming from the audience. Some were cheering while the others were chanting the name of a person who had just arrived on the battlefield that was displayed on the huge screens. Large square-shaped screens projected a battlefield that was riddled with destruction at different corners. A group of 5 were seen backing away in fear as a young man approached them. The group of 5 were laced in green upper battle vests while the young man approaching was in red. He was about 6 feet tall with dirty blonde short hair and a slightly built body. He wasn't too buff, neither was he too slim. He seemed to have a perfectly toned body. He slowly walked towards the group that was backing away, in an elegant and suave manner as his hands glowed crimson. His eyes had a look of coldness and aloofness as he spoke. "Your journey ends here." He stretched out his right palm after saying this. "Ray crimson! 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 Crimson!" Chants of the young man's name that had just appeared could be heard from the audience as a battle ensued between the young man and the group. "Yes, that's me. I'm Gustav Crimson. My journey to this moment had been nothing short of painful, disastrous and dangerous, but also adventurous. I was nothing but a useless trash at the beginning, so how did I become powerful enough for people to chant my name in adoration and for opponents to back away in fear upon my arrival? We will have to take a trip down memory lane for you all to understand. Let's start at where it all began, 3 years ago in a mountain area surrounded by a dense forest of tall trees. Mild winds blew about, giving the atmosphere a serene vibe. At the top of the mountain, a modern city glowing in the dark of night could be seen northwards. From the view up here it was extremely enchanting, and the lights looked like clusters of fireflies. A particularly brightly lit tall tower could be seen far ahead within the heart of the city, extending straight into the skies above. A teenage boy in a maroon-colored school uniform stood at the edge of a cliff with a lifeless look. His hair kept changing color, first red then blue, and green, and now it was currently blonde. There were tears in his eyes as he stared at the city in front. "What is the point of being born into this world when I cannot pursue my dreams?" He spoke in a devastated tone. "Ha ha ha, what am I saying? People like me don't even have the right to dream." He laughed in self-ridicule as he answered his question. "I sure have lived a shitty life, hope I get reborn into a better one," he added as he reminisced. Gustav was born in an age where bloodline was everything. His parents were also mixed blood who could use their bloodlines to perform superhuman feats, but their bloodline was a low-ranked one which solidified their status as average in the society. When Gustav was born, his parents believed he would awaken a high-ranked bloodline due to the fact that mixed bloods coming together to reproduce always brought about an evolved bloodline. Evolved bloodlines were always high-ranked and very powerful. Since bloodline determined your fate and status in society, they had high hopes for their child. Unfortunately, Gustav awakened an evolved bloodline that was the most useless in the history of evolved bloodlines. He could only manipulate his hair to change color. Gustav's parents were extremely disappointed when he awakened his bloodline. Gustav, who was only 6 years at that time, noticed his parents' attitude towards him changed for the worse. All the love and care that they had been displaying since his birth disappeared. Sometimes they would not remember to feed him throughout the day, and wherever he complained of hunger, "Useless trash! You only know how to eat!" his parents would shout at him with contempt. It was hard for him to understand at that age, but as he grew, he noticed that he was treated the same way in the society. He couldn't make friends in school and was always bullied repeatedly. His peers and teachers would always point fingers and laugh at him. No one gave a care about him because his bloodline was the trashiest of trash, to the extent that others that were considered trash thanked their stars for the bloodline they awakened. Gustav's dream of joining the MBO Federation and exploring the stars in different parts of the galaxy died with his bloodline awakening. Gustav's mother took in and conceived another boy when he was close to being 8 years old. The same boy was only 2 when he awakened a high-grade bloodline. Gustav's parents were so joyful that they totally ignored Gustav and gave all their love and attention to his junior brother. He loved his brother, so he never hated, but it wasn't the other way around. "Why do I have trash like you as my big brother?" As his little brother grew, he displayed the same contemptible attitude the society shown him. His brother became appreciated more in the society, especially in school where he was known as a genius, while Gustav was shown the opposite. Gustav was hated, treated unfairly, and bullied day by day. He would always come to the mountain located at the west of Plankton City and try to commit suicide, but no matter how he tried, he was still scared of death. He could never go through with the suicide even if he knew that no one would notice he was gone. Whenever he stared at the bottom of the cliff, he would gulp down saliva as he imagined how his bones would be broken to pieces after making contact with the hard ground. "My head will be turned into mashed potatoes." He would always back away and come back the next day with a newfound zeal for committing suicide, but the same situation would repeat itself. He would back away after his imagination went wild again. Today he had decided that he would definitely jump down. He stood a few centimeters from the edge of the cliff and stared down at the forest and the ground below. The ground was more than 1,000 feet away from the cliff. Gulp. This is where the journey of Gustav Oslov ends. He raised his head to the sky and shouted out. His voice echoed across the vicinity as a star in the sky glowed brighter, as if it was replying to him. Eh? Gustav noticed something and gazed at the sky intently. The star that glowed brighter was increasing in size. What's wrong with that star? Why does it keep getting bigger? For someone who was about to die, Gustav was very observant. The stars in the skies were countless, but this particular one located at the northwest kept increasing in size. Gustav's eyes widened as he realized something. Fuck, it's not increasing in size, it headed towards my location. Gustav turned around to run after realizing this. I don't want this kind of death, my body will be blasted to pieces. He screamed in fear as he turned his neck to stare at the projectile headed towards the cliff. Blam! The glowing projectile slammed into the side of the cliff. Crumble! 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 The impact first caused cracks that surrounded a space of more than 50 feet. Gustav had only moved about 7 feet away from his initial position, so he was still within the range of the impact when it started crumbling. Kairar! Gustav screamed like a pig being slaughtered as he fell along with the pieces of the crumbling cliff towards the bottom of the mountain. In the process of falling and screaming like a pregnant woman in labor, Gustav fainted in midair due to fear and shock. That was the reason he didn't notice a small crimson glow fly into his mouth that was wide open from all the screaming. Chapter 2. Huh! Am not dead? Gustav woke up to find himself lying in the middle of the forest. He slowly picked himself up and dusted the dirt on his clothes. He was still in his school uniform. Am not even injured in the slightest, he noticed after checking his body out. The sun was slowly rising from the east as rays of light shone through the spaces within the leaves on the tree ahead of him. An entire night has passed? Gustav's eyes widened in shock after realizing this, but in the next second, it went back to normal. It's not like anyone would notice that I was gone anyways, he muttered dejectedly. He turned around to glance at the mountain where he fell from when he noticed something blinking in his line of sight positioned at the left corner. His eyes focused on the blue rectangular blinking light, and something unexpected happened. Welcome host. Characters suddenly appeared in his line of sight. What's this? Gustav voiced out with a look of astonishment. He turned left and right, but he still could not get the characters out of his line of sight. Thinking he was dreaming, Gustav closed his eyes. I probably hit my head when I fell. After a few seconds, he opened his eyes back only to see more characters appear in his line of sight. Idiot host, you have been chosen to wield great power. Idiot host? Did these characters just insult me? Gustav questioned. Wait. Host? He asked in confusion. You have 10 seconds to decide if you accept this power or not. Power? What power? What is happening? Why am I even replying to some weird characters? Am I dead? Is this retribution for committing suicide? Madness in the afterlife? Gustav threw out a series of questions at a fast pace as he doubted his current existence and sanity. As if it was answering his question, the characters changed again, You may choose to decline this power, but that would spell death for you. Gustav held his chin after seeing these characters change again. So I'm alive, but the price for that is this madness. He wondered out loud. Wait, it just threatened to kill me? 10-9. Huh! It just started counting down. Gustav noticed the characters changing every second it counted down. 7. Will I truly die if I don't give an answer or decline? Gustav was a bit scared of facing death again after what happened the night before. 6. You shall die, the characters answered with bluntness. Gustav. 4-3. Gustav could feel his heart rate slowing down as the countdown got closer to 0. Ba-dump. Ba-dump. 2-1. I accept! Gustav shouted out. The countdown paused immediately after he said that. Huff! 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 This thing was truly gonna kill me? Gustav breathed heavily after the countdown stopped. He placed his right hand on his chest to feel his heartbeat. He sighed in relief after feeling it slowly returning back to normal. Congratulations on accepting this power. Your fate has now been turned around. The characters changed again. What power is it referring to? He stared at the characters with a confounded look. Your body shall now undergo constitution examination and evolution. Yawn. Gustav noticed that his eyes were getting heavy after seeing the last message that the characters formed. Host shall be transported to his abode and remain unconscious for the next 24 hours. What AR? Before Gustav could complete his statement, he noticed a dark silhouette streak from tree to tree about 100 feet away on his west. Swee! 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 The speed was fast and kept dashing from tree to tree surrounding Gustav. It was like a dark shadow. Who's there? He recognized that it was a person immediately. As if to answer his question, a 2-meter muscular-looking male clad in a black tight-fitted bodysuit appeared 20 feet away from him. He had a green mask covering half of his face. You're coming with me, kid! The voice sounded a bit hoarse. 10. Who are you and what do you want? Gustav questioned with a look of fright as he took several steps backwards subconsciously. 9. I only need for you to come with me. No questions asked? The unknown man stated with a commanding tone. 8. What do you plan on doing with me? Gustav questioned as his heart started beating in a fast manner. Just come with me willingly. Don't try anything funny or I will have to hurt you. The unknown man threatened with his eyes furrowed. 5. Badump. 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 With every passing second, Gustav felt more drowsy, but he was determined not to be caught by this unknown man. A kidnapper? A mixed blood trafficker? What if he sells me? Tortures me? Cut off my organs and sell them? For someone who wanted to commit suicide, he was really scared of the horrors he might pass through if he was caught by this unknown person, so he didn't notice the countdown. 4. Run! Immediately this thought came to his mind, Gustav turned heels and ran in the opposite direction. Fool! The man snorted as he dashed from tree to tree, making a circular streak around Gustav, who was kept running. The man suddenly dashed down from the middle of a 600 feet tall tree towards Gustav. Gustav, who already knew the man was a mixed blood and calculated his movements, decided to drop his body to the ground immediately. The man dashed out. In the process of his body descent, the man was also in midair, dashing towards him with speed. Gustav realized his calculations were not accurate, as the man's hand was only a few centimeters away from touching his shoulder, as his body was in the process of descent. It was as if time had come to a stop as the unknown man's palm was about to make contact with Gustav. 0. Host shall now go into deep sleep. Gustav immediately felt his vision darken as the notification appeared in his line of sight. A flash of bright light suddenly appeared and surrounded Gustav, and in the next second, sing! Gustav disappeared right into thin air as the unknown man's hand phased through light particles. Dumb! His feet landed back on the ground and slid some feet forward due to his immense speed earlier. He turned to stare left and right repeatedly. He's gone? The man questioned with a disbelieving expression. A spatial bloodline? How rare! He spoke with a low voice. But at most, that kid will be a Zulu-ranked mixed blood. His abilities wouldn't have matured yet, which means he can't get far with that teleportation. He must still be within the vicinity of this forest. Immediately after completing those words, the man dashed out like a phantom, jumping from trees to trees with an unimaginable speed. He decided to sweep the forest from the north just in case he might come across Gustav again, but it was futile because, at this moment, Gustav had been transported into his bedroom. The winds within the forest kept blowing mildly as if unaware of what just went down. What Gustav didn't notice was, the tall mountain he wanted to commit seppuku from was now half of what it used to be earlier. 30 minutes ago the day had started to brighten up as the sun rose, declaring the end of the previous night. The night was meant for sleeping, but it would seem like it was the opposite for a group of people gathered around a particular mountain within the forest at the edge of Plankton City. The group gathered here were suited up in medical-looking garments. A large saucer-like technological-looking device floated above the mountain. Rays of blue light shone from it, scanning the mountain inch by inch. A man sporting dark brown hair clad in an azure-colored suit stood in front of the mountain with 4 bodyguards in dark tight-fitted bodysuits positioned on his left and right. The officials suited in medical garments kept moving to and fro. They seemed to be investigating the weird phenomenon of the mountain being halved in one night. Chapter 3. One of the people suited in a medical garment with a spectacle on his face walked towards the man in an azure-colored suit. Apart from the point of impact, nothing else can be found here. This is a waste of time, he reported in a low voice. You're telling me that nothing can be found here after the large energy surge detected in this area? That's impossible. The man in the azure-colored suit spat. It may seem impossible, but that is the current situation, the medical man replied. No form of energy whatsoever can be found here since we've been searching for an entire night, he added. The man on azure-colored suit had a look of contemplation as he walked forward slowly. Lock down this forest, and do a clean sweep of the entire surrounding, he commanded. No one is allowed to come in or go out of this forest. Anyone found within this vicinity must be brought in for observation and questioning. Immediately he finished giving out this set of instructions, the 4 guards behind dashed off in separate directions, heading deep into the forest. I need every ounce of resource and power I can lay my hands on right now, the man on azure-colored suit stated with a solemn face as he placed his hands behind his back. Interlocking his fingers, the medical man behind shook his head and sighed after hearing his last statement. This same event led to the situation Gustav experienced. In a dimly lit room, a teenage boy in maroon school uniform lying in a small tube placed in the middle of the room. He was currently in deep sleep as his hair kept changing color repeatedly, and his eyes trembled slightly from time to time like something was making him feel uncomfortable. Completion of system update into host 12%. Host has received blessings of the restoration. Host has received recreation. Host has received toxin immunity. Completion of system update into host 24%. Host has received the function bloodline upgrade. Host has received the function bloodline downgrade. Gustav could hear the ringing of notifications in his ear as he slept. If he was awake, he would have seen this process. 12 hours later, completion of system update into host 97%. Host has received the function QESTS. Host has received the function daily tasks. Completion to system update 99.9%. Completion to system update 100%. System update completed. Immediately after Gustav opened his eyes, this was the first thing that popped up in his line of sight. At first, he tried backing away before hitting his head on the side of the tub he was lying in. Ouch! So that wasn't a dream? He asked rhetorically as he recollected the events that happened in the last 24 hours. Congratulations, host, you have now received this power completely. Gustav stared at the characters with a dumbfounded look still. What power does this character keep talking about? To check out what this power entails, call out System Interface. Gustav stared at the characters change again. He looked around his small room to be sure no one was in the vicinity, which was obviously stupid since he was in his room. System interface, he muttered with a low and partially sleepy voice. Immediately after saying that, he saw the characters change form again and table out a list before him. Host attributes, skills and abilities, bloodlines, quests, shop. Seeing the outline before his eyes, Gustav felt this looked a bit familiar. Host attributes. He seemed to have started getting the way it worked, so he called out. After saying that, the rest of the characters disappeared except for the host attributes. Host attributes: name, Gustav Oslov, level 1 class, EXP 0/100 HP, 100/100 energy, 30/30. Attributes: strength 1, perception 1, agility, null speed 1, bravery, null intelligence 4, charm, null. Attributes: point 0. Gustav had a dark face on, staring at some of the information displayed. Agility, bravery, charm, null? This damn characters! He was having a hard time digesting the information displayed. As if to answer his grudge, a piece of information appeared above the table of information. These attributes have been properly calculated, and it would seem the host is lacking in various aspects, especially charm and bravery. Gustav had the urge to curse upon seeing the bluntness of the system. I have brav. He wanted to shout out that he had bravery when he remembered everything that happened last night. Him wanting to go commit suicide again, but running for his life upon noticing a life-threatening projectile headed towards him. Okay, I get your point, he admitted with a voice of defeat. But I have ch. Never mind. Remembering his sad life up to this point, he knew he truly lacked in both these aspects. But why does this thing look like an old-age gaming system? Levels? Points? He recognized this from ancient games that humans used to play long before the Slarkovs descended upon the earth. He knew about this since he read books a lot. Skills and abilities, Gustav called out. The host attributes panel disappeared, only to be replaced by skills and attributes. Skills and abilities, level 1 regeneration, level 1 morph, level 1 toxin immunity, level 1 recreation, level 1 bloodline acquisition, level 1, locked. Gustav could see a large number of locked skills and abilities extending downwards. It truly is like those old games. Gustav held his chin as he spoke. Everything seems to be on level 1, but does it increase with leveling up? I have a general idea of what toxin immunity and regeneration are supposed to do, but what about to others? Recreation, bloodline acquisition, and morph? What are those? Just as he was wondering, some hidden information suddenly appeared below the skills. Level 1, ability to increase current speed by 20 for 10 seconds, regeneration level 1, recover from injuries 10 times as fast, morph level 1, bloodline ability change hair color and skin tone at level 1, toxin immunity level 1, protection against not so serious toxins, recreation level 1, bloodline acquisition level 1. Ability to steal bloodlines and pair them with host if the right requirements are met. DF rank. Ability to change skin tone seems to have been added to my bloodline, but why is it named morph? Still, is there any difference between that and the same useless changing hair color? Gustav sighed in disappointment upon seeing the information beneath morph, and his eyes moved down. Gustav's sight got to the recreation part, and squinted his eyes in suspicion. Apart from the rest, this was the only ability without a piece of information beneath. He stared at it, his sight traveling from the top to bottom and from the bottom to top. Could this be a glitch? Why won't this one show anything? Gustav stared at it with his eyes squinted, but no matter how long he did, nothing popped up beneath it. I guess I will just have to find out later. His left palm was still holding onto his chin as he inspected. I still don't know if this is all just playing tricks in my head. Gustav decided to move to the next ability after seeing that this one wouldn't show any information. His eyes narrowed down on the last one, bloodline acquisition. On reading the information beneath, his eyes widened. What? Gustav couldn't believe what he was seeing. A bloodline stealing ability? His eyes widened with disbelief. This must be a joke, right? He asked rhetorically as he gave a light ridiculing chuckle. My bloodline has always been useless, and now this thing says I can steal bloodlines? Gustav subconsciously stood up and started prancing around the room. He remembered all those years of bullying. All his mates showing off their cool and powerful bloodlines. Him always having to hide due to the shame of only being able to change his hair color. If this is legit then. Gustav paused as his eyes became fierce. I will become the #1 bloodline robber in the world. Chapter 4 Non. Hold on, maybe I'm getting a little too excited here. Gustav sat down on the edge of the tub and held his chin again. I mean, what if this is all just in my head? He questioned his sanity. How do I confirm that everything I'm seeing here is real? Can I try using these skills and abilities? If this is real, wouldn't it be too good to be true? He questioned with a doubtful tone. To use unlock skill, call out the name of the skill in your mind while adding activate behind or in front. A notification appeared in his line of sight above the skill and abilities panel. He read it out, and his eyes squinted. Activate. Which skill do I try out first? Gustav wanted to know if his mind was just playing tricks on him, so he wanted to confirm the authenticity of the so-called system as soon as possible. He stared at the skill and abilities panel again. Skills and abilities. Level 1 regeneration, level 1 morph, level 1 toxin immunity, level 1 recreation, level 1 bloodline acquisition, level 1. His sight scanned through it, and after a while he noticed that only would be a plausible skill to try out for confirmation. Gustav stood up and walked towards the door opposite the tub. On closer inspection of the room, there was literally nothing to be found except for the tub he slept in placed in the middle and a small closet placed at the east corner. Closed system interface. After he called out, the panel closed up and the words and characters disappeared. He had decided he would try activating skill outside. Gustav left through the door and arrived before a small passage that led to the living room. Endrik, Mother trusts that you'll do well today. A light female voice filled with tenderness could be heard ahead. From what I heard, those inspectors will be giving out scholarships to MBO Academy. Yes, Mother, it'll make you proud. A tiny male voice replied. Those inspectors would be blind not to notice me since I'm the highest graded mixed blood in the entire school. The male voice was laced with pride. That's a good son, the female replied. Now let me drop you off at school. Just as she finished saying that, Gustav appeared in the living room. It was a small but well-structured living room. The walls were coated with blue tiles that glowed slightly. Green sofas arranged in an L format, and a cabinet several feet behind. On the cabinet was a round orb that projected a 7-foot-tall image in a holographic form. This was an image of 3 people. A middle-aged-looking man with a square-shaped face sporting dirty blonde hair, a woman who looked to be in her early 40s sporting brown long hair, and a young boy that looked similar to Gustav. He sported beautiful curly black hair. The female who was speaking earlier was standing at the doorpost, and beside her was a 5-feet-tall kid clad in maroon school uniform just like Gustav. Their faces were the same as with the woman and boy in the holographic image. These were Gustav's mother and junior brother. They turned around and noticed Gustav coming from the passageway. Let's go. They totally ignored him as the mother pushed open the door while speaking. H&M. Endrik nodded. Mom, are you not going to drop me off too? Gustav quickly asked before they could step out. His mother paused her steps and turned around to stare at him with a look of disgust. I have told you to stop calling me that. I am not your mother. I have only one son and he is right here, she said while rubbing the hair of Endrik. You are just a liability without any form of usefulness, she stated harshly. You should be glad that my mother and father allowed you to remain in this house and still pay for your school fees even though it's a waste, Endrik added. I don't know how I and Liam ended up creating a useless creature like you. His mother spoke again. Gustav stared down dejectedly as they ridiculed him. He was all too used to this, but it still felt as bad any time he heard them speak this way to him. He would be able to bear it if the world treated him like this, but when it was the people that were supposed to be his family, it hurt in a kind of unexplainable manner. He couldn't blame his junior brother since the kind of society he was born into shaped his character. Trash like you deserves to walk to school, Endrik stated and turned around while pulling his mother by the arm. Slam! The door was slammed shut after they walked through it, leaving Gustav to wallow in self-pity as he stood in the same position for many seconds. He remembered when Hendrik was 5, they would play outside a lot, and at that time his little brother was warm, loving, and playful too. There was a time Hendrik got injured when they were playing hide and seek. Gustav was blamed for the injury and received more than 200 lashes from their father's whip. He could never forget that day. His butt bled and he begged for forgiveness, but his father didn't listen. "You trash! You want to kill my only useful child!" In the process of getting whipped, his mother shouted from the side. It was only a minor bruise that would heal in a few hours, yet they whipped him like he committed a grievous offense. In this age, even if a person lost an arm, it could be fixed, talk less of a minor bruise. Gustav remembered when Hendrik was 8, which was around the same time, his attitude towards him was becoming like that of the people and the society. Hendrik used his bloodline abilities to attack Gustav, giving him a bloody 7 inches gash on his back. The same parents who gave him a lashing after causing Hendrik a minor injury 2 years back laughed and praised Hendrik for increasing the mastery of his bloodline abilities. Gustav still had a bloody scar on his back till today, since no one attended to him. After standing in the same position for a while, Gustav finally started walking again. "What was I expecting? Haven't I been doing this for a long time?" He laughed dejectedly and walked out the door. "Inspectors from HBO will be arriving today? I must get to school on time," Gustav stated with an excited look as he ran. At this point, he had even forgotten about the skills and abilities he was about to test out. His priority right now was to get to school as soon as possible, since those inspectors would be visiting their school today. After testing out the students in the middle school area, which was where his brother's class was located, they would definitely visit the high school afterwards. On the streets, Gustav could be seen running like a madman and sweating like a criminal about to undergo trial for a murder case. This was the 34th Street of Plankton City. It was a commercial area at the edge of the city, so there were mostly short buildings, but most of the buildings were shaped in an octagon-like format and had a sci-fi look. Some of them could even transform their shape and also bore into the ground if the owner wanted it to. As Gustav got further ahead, he was closing in on the area of tall buildings. Vehicles that moved through the air could be seen ahead, giving a splendid view, but this was all too common for people like Gustav born into this age. Plankton City was one of the 6 most technologically advanced cities in the world that came into existence after the descent of the Slarkovs. Tall and enchanting buildings that gave off a sci-fi vibe could be seen. Some of them had videos playing all over the structure, showing commercials and different things they did within the business buildings. A particular one ahead was shaped like an upside-down conical flask, and on the body of the building shone the commercial of a new medical product. A young female sporting blue hair, clad in a medical outfit, spoke while holding a 3-inch red bottle. "We at Photon Lab have created a new type of grade A solution to help in bloodline strengthening." The audio traveled into Gustav's ears as he streaked across the street, but still he paid no heed and kept running. He smiled when he looked ahead and saw a circular blue glow on the walkway, close to the road. People on the walkway could be seen entering into the circular blue glow, and immediately they got in, they disappeared. The circle was large enough to fit in more than 50 people, so those on the walkway entered without needing to slow down or stop, since the number of people walking wasn't much. "After this, I just need to go through 2 more teleportation circles before getting to school," Gustav muttered as he entered the circle. This was a teleportation circle that was located in different parts of the city for easy transportation. This particular one was for pedestrians, and it led to another location in the city. It saved about 2 hours of trekking, since the city was very vast. So long as the number reached 10 and no other person was within 7 feet of the circle, the people within will immediately be teleported. As Gustav got in, the number of people within numbered around 30. Another man in business suit walked in and stood beside him. As more people who were within 7 feet walked in, the man's face could be seen twitching in discomfort, and after a few more seconds he moved away and went to stand beside a woman. Gustav wondered about the reason for the man's strange behavior when he finally caught a whiff of himself. "Eck! I haven't taken my bath today." Due to his idiocy, he exclaimed out loud, and the rest of the people within the teleportation circle turned around to stare at him with disgust. Chapter 5. Gustav, realizing his mistake, felt bashful and stared at the ground in embarrassment, while smiling like a retard. "I think he'll just go with the next set," a man within the crowd said, and proceeded to walk out of the circle. He moved more than 7 feet away so as not to disturb the circle from transporting the people within. Some others followed him, and in a few seconds, there were only about 7 more people left within the circle, Gustav included, making it extra spacious. Swing! The teleportation circle activated and the people within disappeared. 30 minutes later, Gustav finally arrived at school. It was pretty large. It was comparable to the size of a university, whereas it only had middle school and high school students. A big sign hung up at the first entrance. Echelon Academy. There were tall silver-colored structures within. Different buildings for different academic purposes. Cars and different luxurious-looking vehicles that floated few inches above the surface of the ground could be seen streaming in. Since Plankton City was one of the 6 greatest cities in the world, every school located within was high class. Echelon Academy had the second highest population and was known all across the world for one reason. Great mixed blood in the MBO organization attended this school at their young age. The MBO, Mixed Blood Organization, was an organization set up by the government to handle situations related to bloodlines. Since mixed bloods could perform feats out of the extraordinary, normal means, and people wouldn't be able to handle them. Imagine trying to shoot down a mixed blood that had the ability to move faster than the speed of light. It would be an impossible feat for normal people, so the MBO was there to handle situations like criminals that used their bloodlines for bad. The MBO had different branches that handled different situations. Some were like cops, always roaming about the street to prevent mixed blood from committing or getting away with crimes. Some handled mixed blood terrorists and traffickers of mixed blood organs. The most respected branch were the ones that traveled across the galaxies. Ever since the Slarkovs appeared, it had been confirmed that there were alien life forms outside of Earth. Using the technology of the Slarkovs, the Earth had traveled to different parts of the galaxy and made a pact with different planets. Thousands of years had passed, but humans were still exploring the universe. Gustav had always wanted to join the MBO since he was young because he wanted to travel across the galaxy, visit different planets, and meet different species, but without a high-ranked bloodline that would be an impossible task since MBO was said to possess the most powerful mixed blood in their ranks. They faced a lot of dangers in space exploration, so they always recruited and trained people with high-grade bloodlines. At least your bloodline had to be C-grade before you can be considered for recruitment. They would still have to undergo 4 years of training at the MBO military camp. Gustav ran into the school as fast as his legs could carry him. Unlike the others who were being brought to school by their parents, he had to walk to his class building. It would still take him close to 20 minutes of running before he could get to Block C, which was located in the east part of the school. Apart from training, Mixed Blood Echelon Academy also taught normal school subjects like mathematics and English. It was only after graduating from high school that mixed blood could decide to attend a college or university that was for mixed bloods only. If they ended up being picked, their classes would only be about training their bloodlines, but at high school, every student, regardless of whether you were a normal human being, a Slarkov, or a mixed blood, were taught normal school subjects amid the extracurricular activities for mixed bloods. Gustav running within the school had already garnered attention. People started giving him weird stares. "Oh, it's that trash again. Why does he still attend this academy?" Some of the students headed towards their classes within their parents' vehicles stared at him in disgust. Although there were normal human beings without any special abilities that attended the school, the difference between them and Gustav was, they would never awaken any abilities due to their normal bloodlines, so they didn't garner attention. But as for Gustav, he was ashamed to mix bloods with the bloodline he awakened. Even though there were different grades of bloodline which determined social status, no matter how low a person's bloodline was, they were still respected by those without bloodlines, but Gustav was despised by mixed blood and humans alike. His bloodline didn't even have a grade or a name, unlike the others. There was another reason he was well known throughout the academy, and that was because, in junior high, he confessed love to the most beautiful girl in the academy, Yuhiko Kaira. Yuhiko had always been nice and treated others fairly according to what he noticed. This caused him to develop feelings for her. He didn't know where the courage came from, but he walked up to her when school was over about 3 years ago and confessed to her that she was his crush. This was when she shone her true colors. Gustav was crushed by his crush. Yuhiko's bloodline granted her the ability to turn matter into whatever she wished. She was so mad that Gustav had the guts to profess love to her that she transformed her hairpin into a boulder and dropped it on Gustav. Gustav's body was crushed from the weight, and he broke more than 100 different bones in his body. Like literally, he got crushed by his crush. He was saved by a teacher who was afraid of the school receiving a bad name from a student dying within. If not for that, he would be dead today. TCH, he still came to school today again after I asked him to commit suicide 2 days ago. Wait till I break all your fingers. A male within a blue car that streamed across the school road mumbled with a look of hate as he stared at Gustav from the small screen within the car. Gustav, who was currently jogging while panting heavily, had no idea that he was being watched by someone in the car that just streaked past. After running for close to 20 minutes, he was finally closing in on 3 large buildings joined in AU format. It was also silver-colored like the rest but more luxurious looking. They were all 3-story buildings. Looks like I made it on time. How did I manage to get here without resting one bit, and am not even feeling as tired as I used to? Gustav wondered as he walked forward toward the building. This was the special block for mixed blood attending the school. Gustav was currently a student of Class 3C. This was his 3rd year of high school, and after this year he would graduate from the academy. Subject-wise, Gustav was very smart and intelligent. He easily beat all the mixed blood in his class when it came to passing exams like English and maths, but this almost meant nothing at this age. Even if you were extremely smart and wanted to become a scientist, without a good bloodline, science universities wouldn't pick such a person unless they had connections within the circle of the rich and powerful. Gustav finally arrived in front of the class, which was in the middle of the 2 buildings. On getting inside, everyone within the class turned to stare at him, but in the next second, they turned their faces back towards the teacher standing in front of them. Hisses and snorts could be heard as he walked to his seat that was positioned at the southwest corner of the class, way behind the rest of the seats. The male teacher didn't even spare him a glance, almost like he was just a gust of wind passing by. The class was arranged like a normal class with desks arranged in rows and columns. There was a projection on the wall. It was like a body chart showing the internals of a mixed blood channeling power from his bloodline. Gustav sat down at his usual lonely corner and listened to the teacher speaking. Apparently, the male teacher was talking about how they would be having their last exams in the next 6 months, which would determine whether they would be picked by higher institutions that trained bloodlines. Gustav was paying attention when a notification sound rang in his head. A blue rectangular blinking light appeared at the top left corner of his sight. Damn, I forgot about this! Gustav exclaimed loudly as a message popped out in front of him. Daily task completed, 1/3 travel 3 km square route. Daily tasks? Gustav stated with a weird look as he stared at the message. He suddenly felt uncomfortable, like something was prickling his skin from every angle. Sensing the sudden silence, his vision focused on the classroom again, and he noticed everyone staring at him. His eyes widened as he realized he just shouted out his words instead of saying them internally. Not only is he trash, but now he's a mad trash, eh? A female student muttered. The class had a look of disgust as they stared at him. The teacher went back to explaining after Gustav stood up to apologize. This damn thing, Gustav muttered internally in discomfort. Host is the definition of a damn thing. Immediately Gustav saw the message appear in his line of sight. He nearly puked out blood. This. He almost shouted out again, but he controlled himself. After calming down, he remembered the message that appeared earlier. What is daily task? Chapter 6. After calming down, he remembered the message that appeared earlier. What is daily task? Daily task can be found in quests panel. Quests? Gustav remembered the rest of the system interface. Oh, I didn't check everything. Quest was after Bloodline, I think. Gustav wondered and proceeded to call out in his mind, system interface. Tunim. Host attributes, skills and abilities, bloodlines, quests, shop. Immediately the panel appeared before his eyes. He called out in his mind again, quests. Quests, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. Gustav scrutinized the list properly. Aren't quests like missions? Gustav wondered, things you do and get some kind of rewards from according to those old games, but why is there a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly? Gustav kept squinting his eyes as he thought. After thinking for a while, daily. Gustav called out in his mind again. Quests, daily, today's task, 1/3. Run 3 kilometers, status, completed, square root. Climb to a height of 20 meters, status, 0/20 m. Carry a total of 150 kilograms, status, 0 out of 150. Rewards for completion, plus 5 attributes points. Punishment for failure, hidden, will be revealed when the host fails to complete the task. Gustav almost had his eyes bulging from their sockets upon seeing the second and third quests for the day. Climb a height of 20 meters? Carry 150 kilograms? Who is this damn thing trying to kill? I can't even lift 20 kilos, talk less of a full 150? Gustav nearly screamed out again, but he controlled himself. Mixed bloods were stronger than the average man regardless of their rank and grade. Gustav instead was weaker than the average 17-year-old. His physical abilities were extremely lacking, but what he didn't know was, after the system paired with him, he was now as powerful as an average full-grown man, which was why he was able to run down to school without taking rests even though he was panting. Gustav angrily closed the system interface so he didn't notice the part that mentioned rewards and punishment. At the moment the teacher was rounding up with their class and another teacher could be seen coming in. It was a female teacher sporting a gray-colored hair clad in a tight-fitted green gown. An unbuttoned brown leather jacket hung on her shoulders. Miss Amy! The students exclaimed in excitement. This teacher was the most beautiful and powerful mixed blood in the entire school. She was a kilo-ranked mixed blood and her bloodline was a grade B. So long as a mixed blood had a bloodline graded above D, that person would be respected by everyone. Even the male teacher who was leaving bowed his head a little in respect when he got to her front. She nodded back and walked to the front of the class. Gustav had an excited look on his face upon seeing her. Unlike the rest of the teachers, she never shown a detestable attitude towards Gustav. In fact, she never showed any attitude. She had an uncaring and aloof face. She was always professional in her teaching and never did favoritism. She was the teacher for bloodline channeling. Gustav admired her because her teaching was one of the best and easiest to understand. Even if he couldn't channel his bloodline like others, he still understood her teaching properly. She didn't even waste time or bother to answer their calls. She went down straight to the teaching of the day. I have been teaching you about channeling your blood to the third point for the past 3 weeks now. She started speaking. If you have been doing as I instructed, your bloodline must have connected to the third point, she stated while staring at the students. When you hear your name come out for bloodline channeling inspection. Most of them had looks of excitement, as she mentioned that. Ria Rhoda! Miss Amy called out. A short female student sporting green hair, putting on binoculars, walked out from the first row. She got to the front and stood opposite Miss Amy. Stretch out your arm! Miss Amy commanded, and she complied by stretching out her right arm. Miss Amy grabbed it with her right index and thumb fingers. In a second she released her grip. Successfully channeled through the third point, Miss Amy stated with a slightly pleasing look while the girl smiled in joy. Oh, that's our Ria. I knew she would have gotten past it. Cheers could be heard coming from the mouths of some of the students. Mostly females. You can go back to your seat, Miss Amy added, which the girl complied. Gila Andrews. Miss Amy proceeded to call out the next person, who was also a female. It was the same result. This student also completed the bloodline channeling to the third point. Miss Amy continued calling them out one by one for the inspection. This bloodline channeling had to do with circulating the bloodline within your body, which was where the abilities came from. The bloodline of the mixed blood was not always congested from birth. They would only have a small amount within the body. Because of this small amount, they were not able to perform large feats with their bloodlines yet, even if they have a high-graded bloodline, until they channeled it to keep increasing in quantity and quality. This was where the issue of ranks came in. A mixed blood could have a B-grade bloodline and lose to another mixed blood with an F-grade bloodline due to ranks. The more the bloodline is channeled to keep increasing in quantity and quantity, the more a mixed blood increases in ranks. The first step was to locate the bloodline in your body and find a way to control and move the blood to any part of the body you wished to. There were 4 channel points within the body. Before a mixed blood could get to the lowest rank, Zulu, their bloodline needed to be channeled to connect these 4 points together. Once that was completed, they would have officially become a Zulu-ranked mixed blood. While Miss Amy was inspecting the bloodline channeling of Class 3C, another inspection was going on in another part of the school. Middle school area, mixed blood training ground. A group of students could be seen in the hundreds within the training ground. It was like a stadium with spectator seats surrounding the training ground. These students looked to be on the young side, ranging from age 10 to 13. They sat on the spectator's seat as a young boy could be seen attacking a trio of robots with his bloodline abilities. The female students watched with dazed eyes while the male students watched with envy as the boy dominated the 3 robots, and was slowly pushing them back. At a particular spectator's corner, a group of 4 sat down together and watched the display. 2 of them had their mouths wide open as they watched while the other 2 were grinning from ear to ear. One glance and you could tell that they were the prestigious and powerful sort. The way they dressed and their demeanor spoke volumes, but at the present, the 2 had looks of disbelief. "How is this even possible?" one of the people spoke. He was a bald man with a brown goatee and he sat on the right. "Those are level 3 AI, comparable to a Zulu-ranked mixed blood. This child shouldn't even be able to trade blows with them, yet he's winning." The other man sporting black hair voiced out while watching the student battle with the 3 humanoid-looking machines. "Inspector Dillon, Inspector Blob, I mentioned it before that this kid is special, but you wouldn't believe me." The man who spoke was seated on the left. He wore glasses and had a long black coat on with a blue sweatshirt within. He looked like he was in his 30s. "Ah, Principal Will, how did you think we would believe that a kid, no more than 10 years old, would already be a Zulu-ranked mixed blood?" This was the same man who spoke first, and he was Inspector Dillon from the MBO. Chapter 7. This is our best middle school student, Endrik Oslov. He awakened in grade bloodline that allows him to warp space to his will. Principal Will explained. It's like the combination of telekinesis, gravity, and part spatial abilities. Lest I forget, from the age of 8, his bloodline was already channeled through the 4 points, making him the youngest Zulu ranked in the history of mixed blood. Principal Will added. The 2 inspectors had looks of bewilderment as they stared at the young boy battling the humanoid AI droids. At present, the Endrik leapt 2 meters up and pushed his hand downwards while descending. His curly black hair floated upwards in the process. A strange force suddenly pushed down the droid headed towards him from the front. Blam! The force caused the droid to fall to its knees, but before the boy could attack again to finish it off, 2 other bots similar in appearance closed in on him from both sides. Their arms that were currently shaped like guns shot out a laser-like beam towards Endrik, making him jump backward, dodging the beams. I heard that he can send his will as far as 2 kilometers and also able to lift up to 800 kilograms with his mind, is that correct? Inspector Blob questioned with an excited look as he watched. Even better, just watch how we'll defeat those 3. Principal Will seemed to be enjoying their reaction, but he didn't want them to miss Endrik defeating the level 3 AIs. There's something he still hasn't used. Principal Will's statement gave them a suspenseful feeling again. They were already satisfied with what they were seeing, yet Principal Will claimed the boy was even more awesome than they had anticipated. The middle school male student battling the 3 bots did a backflip twice in the air, dodging some projectiles in the process. After landing several feet away, he slid back by a few centimeters. The 3 droids dashed towards him again. The one in the middle shot out a net crackling with electricity. Endrick pushed out his right palm in response. A strange force pushed the net backward and it ended up covering the bot that shot it towards him. The droid was trapped by the net it shot out, and started thrashing around trying to free itself. The remaining 2 droids closed in on Endrick. Their hands transformed into a 2 feet blue glowing blade. They took a swung at him. Endrick waved his right hand towards the left. His action caused the eye on the left to shift towards the right a little, which in turn made it collide with the blade of the one on the right. Screeve! The arm and the blade collided. The blade of the droid on the right side cut 7 inches deep into the arm, or the droid on the left. The droid tried to pull his blade out of its companion arm, but it was proving difficult. In the process of them trying, the boy placed his right finger on his forehead and stared at the droids. Structure analyzation. His will scanned the body of the droids from head to toe, and in the next second a huge grin could be seen on his face. Got it! Immediately those words were uttered, he stretched out both his hands in a griping format. At this moment, the droids had managed to get themselves freed and were headed for him, but immediately he clenched his hand. The droids had an indescribable feeling of something crawling around their insides. Endrick suddenly pulled his clenched hand back with force. Rip! Rip! The chests of the droids were ripped open from the inside and a circular-shaped object flew out of it. Plop! Plop! Both droids fell with their blue glowing sockets dimming in the process. Both objects landed on Endrick's right hand. On closer look, it was a blue glowing baby palm-sized object. Endrick could sense the energy coming from it. Tuh! All of a sudden 2 beams were shot towards Endrick from the front. Swerve! Even though it was supposed to be a sneak attack from the 3rd droid, Endrick already sensed it and dodged in a timely manner. The 3rd droid was headed towards him after tearing apart the net. Endrick pushed his hand out towards the direction of the incoming droid, clenched his fist like he was holding on to something, and pulled back his hand. Rip! The same situation repeated itself. The middle of the droid's chest ripped apart from the inside and the same small blue object as before flew out, or it landing in Endrick's hand. The light in the droid's eyes dimmed as it also fell to the ground. Cheer! 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 The students seating on the spectators' seats started cheering loudly. Most of the females called out his name with admiration. He reacted by placing his left hand on his head and rubbing his hair back in a suave manner. He started walking towards the northwest corner as the 3 objects floated above his palm. How did he do that? His will pulled out their core from the depths of the droid's internal. Inspector Dillon questioned with a disbelieving look. His telekinesis can pass through solid objects? Inspector Blob also had the same disbelieving look as he stared at Endrick walking towards their direction from above. Remember when I mentioned his telekinetic also had a spatial effect? This is what I meant, Principal Will stated with a delightful look. Endrick reached the end of the training ground and stared upwards, where the 4 were sitting. I believe this belongs to you. Endrick raised his right hand upwards slightly. The core of the droids floated upwards towards the 4. Class 3C, High School Area. Miss Amy just finished checking the second to the last student in the class, who was male and with a bulky build. Surprisingly, he failed to channel his bloodline to the 3rd point and was being booed by the class. He had a D-grade bloodline, yet the class didn't spare him. Dash. Tomboa is such a trash. Dash. So useless. He couldn't even reach the 3rd point. Dash. I'm breaking up with this loser. He timidly walked back to his seat amid the insults. He heard a female on the middle row say she was going to break up with him, which made him feel disheartened. His appearance and current behavior contradicted one another. He looked strong, but the insults made him shrink in embarrassment. Quiet! Miss Amy voiced with an authority. The class quieted down upon hearing her speak. The last person on the list, she continued speaking. Gustav Oslov. She stared at the back corner where a teenage boy sporting blonde hair, looking like a shrimp, could be seen seated. Chatter. 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 The class became noisier when his name was mentioned. And me? Gustav was surprised that he would also be inspected since unlike the others he didn't have a proper bloodline. His useless bloodline was not even enough to connect to the first point, so he couldn't channel it like the rest of them. Aren't you a part of this class? Miss Amy questioned with a straight face. Why ye? Before Gustav could answer, a male student sitting on the first row stood up and interrupted. Miss Amy, would be a waste of time to inspect this trash, he shouted out. Dash. Yes, it would be a waste of time. Miss Amy should just move on to the next thing for today. Dash. His bloodline is considered below F grade. Miss Amy, don't waste your time with a trash that has no future. Dash. He can't even channel his bloodline past the first point. The rest of the students agreed with the male student who spoke the first time, calling Gustav all sorts of names. Gustav was used to this kind of scenario, but he still sighed internally. Silence. Miss Amy shouted in a slightly annoyed tone. Don't tell me how to teach my class, brats. Know your place. Miss Amy voiced out. The students immediately shut up. They knew just how Miss Amy could be if she got mad. She could decide to deduct all their points assessed from the start of the term, which would, in turn, affect their graduation since most of them had plans of schooling in a mixed-blood college or university. This subject was very important. Gustav, I am waiting. Miss Amy called out again after noticing that Gustav just sat down looking like a moron. Gustav immediately stood up upon hearing her call for him the second time and started walking towards the front of the class. His classmates gave him weird stares, but they couldn't say anything since Miss Amy asked them to keep quiet. Gustav got to the front and stood in front of Miss Amy. He stared at her with a timid look, but her stare was that of aloofness as she spoke. Stop acting like an idiot and stretch out your hand, Miss Amy stated. Oh, so are I. Gustav realized that this was supposed to be his action upon arriving here. He stretched out his right hand towards Miss Amy. Just like others, she placed her index and thumb finger on his wrist. Immediately her fingers made contact with his arm. Notifications appeared in Gustav's line of sight. Host has made contact with a mixed blood. Mixed blood has sent bloodline energy into the bloodstream of host. Gustav's eyes narrowed on the message, but before he could read it completely, more notifications appeared in his line of sight. Requirement for bloodline acquisition has been met. Analyzing host compatibility with creation bloodline 0% per 100%. Analysis complete 75%/100%. Gustav's head was hurting from the multiple notifications, and he nearly fell because of that, but Miss Amy's grip on his wrist had gotten tighter. Unlike the rest, where she only took a second to inspect their bloodline channeling, she was taking longer to inspect his. Host compatibility with creation bloodline is 75%. Does host desire to steal this bloodline, yes/no? Gustav's eyes widened as he read the last notification. Steal Miss Amy bloodline? Chapter 8. Does host desire to steal this bloodline, yes/no? Gustav's eyes widened as he read the last notification. Steal Miss Amy bloodline? His mind was in a chaotic state as he wondered. Yes. I mean no. Gustav answered in a panicky manner. Host has decided to steal this bloodline. Bloodline extraction shall now begin. What? I said no. Remembering how powerful her bloodline was earlier, made Gustav subconsciously say yes, but after he realized that Miss Amy had never done him wrong like the others, he quickly changed his mind. Oh my God, what have I done? Gustav screamed internally as another notification came up. Bloodline extraction process, 0%/100%. Gustav quickly thought about how to salvage the situation. He remembered that Miss Amy was currently holding onto his arm and decided to pull his arm back, feeling that physical contact was necessary for the extraction of bloodline, but no matter how hard he tried, Miss Amy's grip on his hand was stronger than he anticipated. She seemed to be in a daze as she held onto Gustav's palm with her eyebrows twitching from time to time. Oh my God, she's gonna lose her bloodline if she doesn't let go of me. Gustav was still trying to pull his arm out of her grip. All of a sudden he noticed something. The percentage isn't moving. Gustav stared at the percentage bar. Bloodline extraction process, 0%/100%. It had been a few seconds since Miss Amy grabbed him with her 2 fingers, yet it was still at 0%. A second after noticing that, another notification appeared in his line of sight, replacing the former. Bloodline extraction has failed. Why did it fail? Gustav wondered in his mind, forgetting that he was opposed to the extraction a few seconds ago. What is Miss Amy doing? Why is she taking this long to check out that trash? The students, chattering amongst themselves, brought Miss Amy out of her reverie. She quickly let go of Gustav and stared into his eyes like she was searching for something. Gustav also stared at her. He tried to look calm, but within he was screaming in fear, "Oh my God, I'm dead." She must have noticed it. She must have sensed that I tried to steal her bloodline. This damn system has finally brought me to the jaws of death. I knew my life was only prolonged for me to die later. Miss Amy is gonna turn me to Maya. Amid his chaotic thoughts, Miss Amy's question brought him back to reality. He didn't hear her question properly, hence his reaction. I said, how did you channel your bloodline energy through the third point? Miss Amy repeated her question. Gustav was shocked by the sudden and unexpected question. It was like the class was also just hearing the question too, as they also reacted like Gustav. What? Third point? Me? Gustav asked with a bewildered look. Miss Amy must be mistaken. How would this trash manage to ever channel his bloodline to the third point? It is impossible. Gustav didn't say anything, but he agreed with them, internally believing that Miss Amy must be mistaken. Miss Amy stared at the students with a dark look. Oh, so I'm mistaken? She turned to Gustav. Is there a new ability from your bloodline that you couldn't use before? Miss Amy questioned. New ability? Gustav's mind immediately went back to when he was checking the skills and abilities panel. Does this count? Gustav asked as his skin suddenly started wriggling from his face to every part of his body that was exposed. In a few seconds, his skin color had changed to a dark one. Gasp! The students were shocked to see Gustav's skin tone change. Doesn't his bloodline only grant him the ability to change his hair color? These were the thoughts in their minds. Gustav has passed the inspection by channeling his energy to the third point. Next time you claim I am mistaken, I shall teach you the manners you failed to receive from your parents. Miss Amy turned to glare at the students and stated with a strong tone of warning. The students who spoke earlier had pale faces after hearing that. You may now go back to your seat, Miss Amy said with her usual aloof face. Gustav nodded and proceeded to walk back to his seat. His classmates still had looks of shock and doubt. Even if he's able to channel his bloodline through the third point, it doesn't change the fact that he's trash. These were the thoughts in most of their minds as they stared at Gustav walking back towards his seat. Gustav was just as shocked as the others. He sat down back on his seat with a look of contemplation. My bloodline is already channeled through the third point. His eyes widened as he came to a realization. Does that mean this power I received is real? As he reached this obvious conclusion, he remembered that he just used one of the abilities that he couldn't use earlier on, changing skin tone. It was truly added. Gustav's face suddenly shone in excitement. That means everything is real. I am not mad, and also, I can steal bloodlines. If anyone saw Gustav's face at the moment of realization, they would think he had gone mad because he had a look no different to that of a mad scientist. He suddenly thought of something. Why wasn't it able to steal Miss Amy? Now I remember. Gustav opened the system interface and immediately called for the skills and ability panel to open up. His vision moved down to Bloodline Acquisition. Bloodline Acquisition Level 1, ability to steal bloodlines and pair them with host if the right requirements are met. DF rank, I knew it, Gustav said internally upon reading the information beneath. I can only steal bloodlines at DF rank. For now, Gustav's eyes moved back to the level of the skill. Since it says level 1, then increasing the levels will definitely allow me to steal higher ranked bloodline. Gustav nearly screamed out in excitement seeing all this. Now that I have confirmed that this is real. Gustav knitted his eyes as his gaze turned cold, and he stared at his classmates. For all those years of suffering you all have inflicted on me, I shall make sure I collect compensations. Miss Amy had started teaching another topic. While she was teaching, she secretly stole a glance at Gustav. That kid, there's something weird about him. Right since she entered into the class, she could sense something different about him. She took longer to inspect his bloodline channeling because of this. She was also surprised to see that he had gotten to the third point, but she didn't show it on her face. The strangest part about it was, she also noticed that his bloodline was close to reaching the fourth point. His bloodline may not be as useless as everyone thought, she thought as she remembered his skin tone transformation. After closing hours, Gustav left the school. He trekked back home as usual. His mind went back to everything that happened during the day. The MBO entrance test will be holding in the next 6 months. He had a slightly tense look as he thought, but this time a trace of hope could be seen on his face. I wonder how far I would have gotten with this power by then. Fill your name on the collection form if you are interested in participating in the test. Remember, you cannot participate if you are not a Zulu-ranked mixed blood by then. The exact date and the venue of the test will be communicated to you. Gustav remembered the inspectors that came from the MBO. Class 3 was tested by them, and as expected, Gustav failed the test, but this test was only for the more gifted ones that would be given straight entry into the MBO training camp. Almost all of his classmates had plans of joining the MBO, but only a few were chosen to be exempted from the test. The real test was going to be held 6 months from now, which was also close to the time he would be graduating from high school. Gustav remembered the shocked look on his classmates' faces when he also filled the form. He was ready to disappoint them with his results in the next 6 months. Gustav remembered something again. Since this is real, doesn't that mean I have to perform those daily tasks? Chapter 9. It took Gustav about an hour to get home from school because, unlike in the morning, he wasn't in a haste and his mind was currently preoccupied with plans. When he got home, the entire house was empty. Normally Hendrik would have been picked by his mother and dropped off at home once school closed for the day. Gustav would always meet him at home after trekking from school. Gustav didn't overthink it. He walked straight into his room and sat on the edge of his tub. Unlike normal people, Gustav's parents felt Gustav didn't worth a bed, so a bathtub from the junkyard was placed in his room. He had been sleeping in this bathtub for almost 10 years now. How he still managed to fit into it was because his body was small from malnutrition. He was only slightly taller than his little brother. Gustav opened the system interface again and quickly called for the quest panel to open up. Quests, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. Daily, he called out, causing the panel to change again. Quests, daily, today's task, 1/3. Run 3 kilometers, status, completed, square root. Climb to a height of 20 meters, status, 9/20 m. Carry a total of 150 kilograms, status, 0 out of 150. Rewards for completion, plus 5 attributes points. Punishment for failure, hidden, will be revealed when the host fails to complete the task. This time Gustav properly read it from top to bottom. I will receive 5 attribute points when I complete the task. Just like those games, I should be able to add it to whatever attribute I wish to improve. Gustav analyzed. There's also punishment. Wait, hidden? Why is this whole system power thingy so mysterious? Gustav wondered, but knowing he wouldn't get an answer right now, he threw it to the back of his mind. It says I've climbed as high as 9 meters already? Gustav was surprised to see the status of the 20 meters climbing task. After thinking about it for a while, he understood that it must have been because of the stairs he always climbed to get to the last floor, which was where Class 3C was located. Normally there was an elevator to get up, but Gustav always liked to avoid the other mixed blood whenever he arrived in school, hence his reason for using the stairs. There was even a time when he was beaten up inside the elevator. He preferred not to make contact with the others. His plan initially was to visit the mountain at the edge of the city, and began climbing again, even though he remembered that it would be dangerous since his encounter with the unknown man. He was still willing to risk it. But now that he knew he just needed to climb some stairs to finish the task, traveling to the edge of the city wasn't necessary anymore. What Gustav didn't know was, he just made the right decision when he concluded not to visit the mountain region. Had he decided to go, he would have met with a force that he couldn't handle. Since he knew how to handle the issue of climbing, the next one was lifting up to 150 kilograms. Gustav had a bead of sweat rolling down his forehead as he pondered on how he would handle this situation. Wait, since the system counts and gives me a status of how much of the work has been done, that means it doesn't have to be at once. I don't have to carry 150 kilograms in a go. Gustav finally came to this realization. This means I can keep lifting anything that weighs about 1 kilogram, 150 times for me to complete this. Gustav smiled as he thought of this and proceeded to dash towards the living room. Since no one was around, he was bold enough to come out. He looked around the living room. It all seemed foreign to him since he hardly came out. He couldn't even remember the last time he sat on the sofa. The sofa. Immediately his mind went to the sofa. He walked towards it. The sofa was placed in an L format in the middle of the living room. A 2-seater and a 3-seater. Gustav stood in front of the 2-seat couch. He knew the weight of a regular 2-seat couch was about 40 kilograms, which was more than he had the power to lift, but his parents were poor, so he believed the sofa would be lesser in weight since they couldn't afford high-quality materials. Also, the sofas could dislodge from one another. He planned on separating them so he would lift one several times. Gustav quickly did that and lifted one of the sofas. Huff! Gustav grunted as he lifted it for the first time. He kept the daily task open just so he could see the progress. Carry a total of 150 kilograms, status 16 out of 150. Gustav smiled as he noticed the progress. He dropped the sofa and lifted it up again. Huff! 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 He dropped and lifted it a total of 10 times before stopping. By the time he was done, he was panting heavily. He laid down on the floor and smiled as he stared at the notification that popped up. Daily task completed, 2/3 carry a total of 150 kilograms. After breathing in and out profusely for a while, he quickly connected the sofas back to themselves and placed them in the right position. He didn't want to leave any signs behind that he was there. Gustav, knowing what to do next, went back into his room and pulled off his school uniform, placing them in the small closet behind his tub. When he opened the closet, only a single cloth could be seen within. It was a blue kind of tight-fitted jumpsuit. The color was a bit faded, but that was Gustav's only piece of cloth right now. The jumpsuit had a hoodie, and just like its name, jumpsuit, it was truly a jumper. Its trouser part only got past his knees by a few inches. Gustav quickly put the hood on and dashed out of the house. 2 hours later, Gustav was jogging back home with a smile on his face. He didn't even mind the stares of the people in the surroundings, who kept looking at him with pity, thinking he was a beggar. It was almost 7 p.m. at this time. The sky was close to darkening completely, but the streets were as bright as ever. The tall buildings glowed up, as the skies darkened more and more. When the sky became completely dark, the light bulbs floating above the air brightened up. These light bulbs were lined up all across the streets, positioned in the air on both sides. They weren't visible during the day, but they were always up there. Gustav paused in his steps and stared at the beautiful view. There was no doubt that it was a wondrous sight to behold. Something, in particular, caught Gustav's attention in the distance. It was a tall, brightly lit building. It was so high that its tip pierced into the skies above. It was the tallest building in the city, and it was positioned in the heart of the city. The glowing blue letters on the surface of the building were particularly eye-catching. It gave off a unique feeling. MBO Gustav stared at it and smiled. I can't wait to be able among those that will be granted access into that building. After saying that, Gustav turned around and started heading straight for home again. In a few minutes he got home and headed straight for his room. He didn't know if his mother and brother had arrived yet, but he wasn't bothered. He remembered the notification he got immediately after climbing a 3-story building stairway repeatedly. Daily task completed, 3/3. Host has received +5 attribute points. Host has received 50 EXP. The people within that vicinity gave him stares like he was retarded, but only he understood what he was doing at that point in time. Gustav quickly sat on the tub and opened the system interface. He didn't waste time before checking the attributes panel. Host attributes: name, Gustav Oslov, level 1 class, EXP 50/100 HP, 100/100 energy, 10/30. Attributes stats: strength 1, perception 1, agility null, speed 1, bravery null, intelligence 4, charm null. Attributes 0.5. Oh, it truly got added. Gustav spoke excitedly as he stared at the attribute points. Now how do I share these points? Gustav questioned internally as he held his chin. Chapter 10. Gustav stared at the panel with a look of contemplation. Being able to add 5 attributes point to whatever attribute I wish to increase is not bad, but looking at my attributes, 5 isn't enough to go around. Gustav stared intently at the attributes panel. Attribute stats: strength 1, perception 1, agility null, speed 1, bravery null, intelligence 4, charm null. Attributes 0.5. Placing everything in one category is the only way there can be a substantial difference, but at the same time, the rest will be lacking. Gustav was having a hard time deciding. After contemplating for a few minutes more, he came to a decision. Even distribution will be a much better option, Gustav decided. One stat being way above the other, like strength and agility, will have an adverse effect. Imagine having strength but being slow. How will the strength be used properly? This was Gustav's thought process as he came to the conclusion of even distribution. Now let's go with add 1 point to strength, Gustav stated. +1 attribute point has been added to strength. Add 1 point to perception. +1 attribute point has been added to perception. Add 1 point to speed. +1 attribute point has been added to speed. Intelligence already has 4 points, so not adding to that yet. Which should I pick between bravery and charm? Gustav held his chin and pondered. Let me go with bravery. Gustav decided to pick bravery since he felt charm would only assist in getting girls to fall for him, while bravery would help him stand up for himself. What a foolish thought indeed. Add 1 point to bravery, Gustav said. Unable to add points to a non-existent attribute. What? Gustav was surprised to see the notification that popped up after trying to add a point to bravery. Add 1 point to bravery, Gustav said once again. Unable to add points to a non-existent attribute, Gustav noticed that he skipped agility and tried adding points to it too. Add 1 point to agility. Unable to add points to a non-existent attribute, Gustav had the urge to curse upon seeing this, but he held himself back. He scrutinized the attributes panel properly, and finally came to a realization. Agility, null, speed, 2, bravery, null, intelligence, 4, charm, null. This means I can't add points to agility, bravery, and charm. Gustav started to worry after he came to this realization. Then, how do I raise it? Gustav had a confused look. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't find an answer. The system notifications that always popped up to give him answers to questions like this was silent. Since I can't add it to them yet, then I guess I'll just add it to strength and speed, Gustav said with a solemn look. Add 1 point to strength. +1 attribute point has been added to strength. Attribute stats: strength 3, perception 2, agility null, speed 2, bravery null, intelligence 4, charm null. Attributes 1. Add 1 point to speed. Immediately Gustav said that a notification popped up in his line of sight. Host has achieved agility. Points can now be added to agility. Gustav had a look of confusion on seeing this. How did I suddenly achieve agility? He wondered. Attribute stats: strength 3, perception 2, agility 1, speed 3, bravery null, intelligence 4, charm null. Attributes 0. Is it because I added points to speed? Gustav wondered. Gustav was still new to this, so he knew that overthinking it wasn't going to help. Even though it was faint, he could feel that he had truly increased in strength. He stood up and turned to face his tub. He placed both hands on the edge, clenched it tightly, and lifted it. H-N-N-N. Gustav was able to lift the tub a few centimeters off the ground before dropping it back. Huff! 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 Gustav stared at his hands in shock as he breathed in and out. I definitely increased in strength. I couldn't do that before, he said with an excited look. The bathtub weighed about 85 kilograms. Although he couldn't lift it completely or with ease, he knew he would be able to lift 50 kilograms without stress now. Gustav sat inside his bathtub and smiled. This is it. He clenched his right fist as he raised it. This is how I can finally achieve my dreams. The next day Gustav went to school with his usual means, trekking. Even when he met his brother and mother about to leave the house, he didn't even bother asking her to drop him. He even left the house before them. The daily task was the same as the day before with slight differences. Quests, daily today's task, 1/3. Travel 7 kilometers, status, 0, 1/7 kilometer. Climb to a height of 40 meters, status, 0/40 m. Carry a total of 250 kilograms, status, 0/250 kg. Rewards for completion, plus 5 attributes points. Punishment for failure, hidden, will be revealed when the host fails to complete the task. Gustav checked out the increase as he ran to school. He already had today planned and well thought out. Before he got to school, a notification had popped up in his line of sight. Daily task completed, 1/3 travel 7 kilometers. Gustav was faster in running than before, so he got to school before activities for the day had begun. He quickly went to his class block and started climbing up the stairways. He ran to the last stair and ran down again. He kept running up and down the stairs repeatedly for about 15 minutes until a notification popped up in his line of sight. Daily task completed, 2/3, climb to a height of 40 meters. Gustav smiled as he saw the notification and proceeded to climb up the stairways again. He was able to do this without disturbance since no one ever used the stairs. Everyone used the elevators. Gustav got to his class and as usual insults and snorts were directed at him from different angles. He walked to the far end of the class and sat in his usual lonely corner. What his classmates didn't notice was, Gustav didn't look down like he used to whenever he was coming to school. The day activities began. Gustav listened to most of the classes that taught bloodline-related subjects with newfound enthusiasm. After close to 6 years of studying at Echelon Academy, this was the first time he felt passionate about being in class. The day ended again and Gustav went straight home to go lift the sofa again. In a few seconds he was done and the notification popped up in his line of sight again. Daily task completed, 3/3 carry a total of 250 kilograms. Host has received plus 5 attributes points. Host has received 50 EXP. Host has leveled up. Plus 1 attribute points has been added to all of host's attributes. Gustav had an excited look as he opened the system interface and checked the attributes panel. Just as I thought. Leveling up adds 1 attribute point to each attribute. Gustav stared at the panel. Extra 1 point was added to every category except for the charm and bravery. Gustav was excited because he still had extra 5 attribute points to spare. Gustav evenly distributed the attribute points again, placing 2 in strength, 1 each in agility, speed, and perception. Host attributes: name, Gustav Oslov, level, 2 class, EXP, 0/1000 HP, 150/150 energy, 50/50, attributes, strength 6, perception 4, agility 3, speed 5, bravery null, intelligence 5, charm null, attributes point 0. Gustav noticed that his biceps that had always been tiny bulged slightly. The difference was barely noticeable, but it was there nevertheless. Gustav tried lifting his tub again. He placed both his hand and pulled up. Crych. The tub made a screeching sound as it scratched against the ground while being lifted. Gustav was able to do it with ease this time. He lifted it to his height level before placing it back down. Gustav's chest heaved up and down as he stared at his hand and smiled slightly. The next day the daily task had increased in difficulty again. Gustav didn't mind and kept his current routine in play. As days passed, Gustav kept completing the daily tasks and receiving attribute points. His body was going through a visible transformation in the past few days. His brother Endrik noticed the slight difference but didn't think much of it. Gustav ignored them most of the time and just went straight to school without saying a word about their mom dropping him off. Just like that, a week had passed. Echelon Academy, it was break period during school and students could be seen walking towards the cafeteria close to their block. Gustav was currently on his way to the cafeteria, which was located several blocks away from his class, towards the west. He was checking his current stats as he headed there. Of course, he didn't have any money, but there was a free food section there which he always visited every day. He never ate from home except during the weekends, where he would eat the scraps from his mother and brother's meals. His father was away most of the time due to the nature of his work, which was energy mining. This will be explained later on. Gustav was used to eating once a day and sometimes none. Gustav had been thinking about getting a part-time job so he wouldn't have to keep suffering, but that was proving difficult. He currently checked his status and was happy to see his 1-week improvement. Host attributes: name, Gustav Oslov, level 3 class, EXP 500/2000 HP, 150/150 energy, 50/50. Attributes: strength 13, perception 11, agility 10, speed 12, bravery null, intelligence 12, charm null. Attributes: 0. Even though according to the system he hadn't achieved bravery or charm yet, he was still satisfied with his current pace of improvement. With his strength right now, he was able to lift his tub using a single hand. Gustav walked into the cafeteria that was 2 stories tall. The one below was where he always got free food from. Chapter 11. He quickly went in. It was crowded with students from different blocks. Noisy discussions were coming from every nook and cranny of the place. Dash. Jennifer Brown nude pics have been leaked. Dash. What? Oh my God! Tell me the site name, I need to check. Dash. Her body is so hot. Dash. Boran Industries are involved in some kind of scandal now. Most of them had their devices out, checking different kinds of things on the net. Chatting, checking the trends online, etc. Unfortunately, Gustav never had the privilege to own a device, so he never understood what was fun about all this anytime he saw their looks of excitement. The top floor was where mixed blood usually gathered to eat their lunch, but Gustav had not approached there since his last encounter when he was still in Class 1. He was beaten up and thrown down. Ever since that time, he would only come here to get free food, then go to the back of the cafeteria to eat in solitude. This was his usual style. The back of the cafeteria was silent and empty. That was where he always ate. Gustav got the free lunch from the counter, which was located at the far end. Hardly was anyone seen taking food from here. The students within the cafeteria would give him different kinds of glares, but he was used to this, so he wasn't even bothered. He took the lunch, which was 2 palm-sized bread and a cup of water. The person serving just stared at him with an expressionless look. Gustav's face was not new around here after all. Gustav carried his tray of food and was currently walking towards the back. While he was walking, he noticed 3 male students coming towards him from the right. He recognized the 3, and so did the rest of the students inside the cafeteria. Dash. Hey, isn't that Hung Jo, Ben Rao, and Paul Miguel? Dash. Oh my goodness, what are they doing here in the lower cafeteria? Dash. Hung Jo is still as beautiful as ever. Dash. My dream guy. Some of the male and female students exclaimed in excitement. The one in the middle was the Hung Jo they were referring to. He was about 5'7" in height and had a cute-looking boyish face with short green hair. The 2 on his right and his left were his henchmen, Ben Rao and Paul Miguel. These 2 always followed him wherever he went. Ben and Paul were up to 6 feet tall, so they looked like bodyguards as they followed Hung Jo. Ben was fairly dark in skin color and had a broad body, while Paul looked like a handsome playboy with his lanky figure. Gustav saw them but pretended not to and started walking faster. The 3 were struggling to keep up once Gustav started walking faster. The one in the middle suddenly stopped walking and said to the other 2, "Bring him to me." Immediately he said that both of them dashed to the front of Gustav. Gustav had to pause his footsteps. He slid a few centimeters forward due to the sudden pause, and nearly ended up slamming into one of them. His food tray was only a few centimeters away from touching the school uniform of the Ben Rao who was in front of him. "What do you want?" Before Gustav could complete his statement, Ben Rao suddenly slapped the tray away from Gustav's hands. "Pa!" The tray flew several feet in the air before slamming onto the ground towards the left. Gustav stared at the bread and cup of water sprawled on the floor with a dark look. He wanted to walk towards the bread and pick them up, but before he could, Paul stepped on the first bread. Crush! The bread was completely squished under his foot, but he didn't let it end there. He lifted his foot again and shifted it to the left before bringing it down with force. Crush! The second bread was squished by Paul's foot. Gustav felt like his heart was being torn open as he watched the gruesome scene of his lunch being murdered. "I haven't eaten a single meal since yesterday." Gustav's mind was in a hurtful state. Once food had been gotten from the free counter, it was impossible to get another till the next day. Gustav felt like crying as he looked up to stare at Paul. "WH." Before he could complete the word, Ben grabbed him by the collar and dragged him towards Hung Jo, who was waiting for them behind. Dash. "That trash is really in trouble now." Dash. "Did he piss Hung Jo off?" Dash. "He's done for." They watched as Gustav was dragged towards Hung Jo. Plop. Ben pulled Gustav downward, making him kneel in front of Hung Jo. Hung Jo stared at Gustav, who currently had a lifeless look. "You have the guts to show up in this academy again after I told you to commit suicide," Hung Jo stated. "You really want me to do it for you, eh?" Hung Jo said as he joined his right fist and left palm together. "My food." Gustav was listening, but at the same time, he was thinking about how he was going to feed for the day. "You also had the guts to put your name down for the MBO entrance test. You trash, you don't know your place," Hung Jo said with a snort as he grabbed Gustav's hair. "This trash wants to be on the same test grounds with me. That is very insulting. Do you believe I cannot kill you right now?" Hung Jo's voice became low but very solemn. Hung Jo was the son of an industrialist billionaire who specializes in crafting armor for the MBO. Hung Jo had always been a bully to the extent that he bullied even mixed bloods. Gustav had been on the receiving end since they were in junior high. When Gustav proclaimed love to the most beautiful girl in the school and was nearly crushed to death, this same Hung Jo would come to bully him, day in and day out. Gustav would leave school with a swollen and bruised face, yet when he got home, his parents would never show any concern or try to treat his injuries. When they were promoted to senior high, they ended up in different classes. Gustav was in 1C while Hung Jo was in 1A. This was how Gustav was able to avoid him, most of the time till they got to class 3. Even though he tried to avoid Hung Jo, there were times when they would still jam into one another unexpectedly. When that happened, Gustav would go through another round of bullying. After the visit of the MBO inspectors, Hung Jo was pissed off by the fact that he failed the special test and had to participate in the normal test to get into the MBO. After finding out that Gustav also put his name down for participating in the test, his rage was ignited again, and he decided to teach Gustav a lesson. His plan now was to give Gustav serious injuries so he would end up in the hospital longer than 6 months. He was angered by the fact that a trash mixed blood would share the same stage with him. Hung Jo pulled Gustav's hair to stare at his eyes. "After I'm done with you today, you will question your current pitiful existence. Pa!" Immediately he finished saying that, he smacked Gustav on his right cheek. The force of the slap caused Gustav to slide across the floor as his cheeks became blood red. When his body came to a stop, Paul and Ben walked towards him and pulled his body up. They dragged him towards Hung Jo again. "I will break every bone in your body." Pow! This time Hung Jo punched Gustav's chest. "I will make sure you can never walk again." Pow! "You trash! You will know your place." Pow! With every statement, Hung Jo would send out a punch towards Gustav. His face, his chest, his stomach, his nose, etc. His uniform was already bloody from receiving heavy punches. The whole cafeteria just watched from the side. No one bothered to even come out and try to stop the beating. Gustav was held by Paul on the right and Ben on the left. As he received the painful punches, his mind wandered to a lot of things. Is this how I will remain pathetic? Why am I scared of fighting for myself? Is it because of the consequences I might face? No. I am just being a wimp. Why should I care about some stupid consequences after everything I have faced from the onset? Regeneration has activated, always being treated like I was worth nothing since the start. I have been on the receiving end since my first year. And since it's better to give than to receive, it's high time I started paying them back in kind. Host injuries has been healed completely. Hung Jo, who just finished giving Gustav another punch, was ready to throw a new one. I will make you wish you weren't born! He shouted out as he threw his fist out towards Gustav's nose. As if you haven't done that already! Immediately Gustav spoke, he pulled his right arm forcefully from Paul's grip and grabbed Hung Ja's fist. Pa! Immediately Gustav grabbed Hung Ja's fist. Everyone's eyes widened, but the next thing they saw made them doubt their vision. Gustav grabbed the fist and clenched it tight. Crack! A loud cracking sound rang out, and what came next was a scream. Kyr! Hung Jo fell to the ground as he used his left hand to hold onto his right. My hand! He screamed in pain. Currently, his right hand was bent at an unimaginable angle and he could feel indescribable pain from it. Chapter 12. You bastard! Paul quickly punched out towards Gustav's head from the right side, while Ben, who was on the left, also punched out. Gustav, standing in their midst, saw the two fists coming towards him from both sides and moved backwards with speed. Swoof! The fists missed him by a hair length and almost ended up colliding with one another. As Gustav managed to dodge their first attack, Paul and Ben thought it was due to luck and turned around to attack again. Paul threw out his right fist towards Gustav again. How dare you lay your hands on young Master Hung? Paul shouted out with his fist in motion. Gustav moved to the right side, dodging once again. Immediately he dodged it. Ben's fist was already coming towards his face from the right. Gustav dodged once again. I can see it. No, I can sense it. Gustav was only a bit faster than they were, yet he was able to dodge their attacks in a timely manner. Is this because of perception? Gustav felt like he could calculate their attack trajectory before they sent it out, and also sense an attack that was coming from his blind spot. Ben's fist was coming towards him again from the front. This time Gustav was tired of dodging and finally decided to be on the aggressive side. As Ben's fist traveled towards his face, he moved slightly to the left. Sweeve! Ben's outstretched fist missed Gustav's face by a few centimeters and continued traveling forward due to the force behind it. Gustav, who had moved to the side to dodge, didn't stop there. I have never been in a fight before, but I know one thing. To pour out my anger and pain upon these people who have caused me nothing but suffering, all I need to do is to tighten my fist. As Gustav thought of that, he clenched his right hand tightly. The bone-popping sounds from the intense clench was so loud, it was almost like it was conveying his message of anguish, and that he had reached his limit. And throw it at the people I detest the most. As Gustav came to this conclusion, he raised his clenched fist and threw it forward at Ben, who just finished punching out. Ben hadn't retrieved his fist yet, so he was surprised to see Gustav's fist heading towards him with intensity. He would have liked to counter, but the fist was just too fast for him to react on time. Ben felt his vision turn blurry as a sound of collision rang out. Pow! Gustav's fist slammed heavily onto Ben's jaw from below. The sound of teeth breaking could be heard as Ben was thrown 2 meters into the air before falling on his back and sliding across the cafeteria floors. 3 pieces of broken teeth surrounded by some drops of blood could be seen on the floor beside his head. Gasp! The entire cafeteria gasped in shock, after witnessing the unbelievable scene that had just played out before them. Ben had passed out from receiving a single punch, from a person that had been deemed as trash by the entire school. Hung Jo, who was seated on the ground, clenching his right hand in pain, had a look of disbelief on his face. How did this trash manage to do that? Paul was also shocked and stood in the same position without trying to attack for many seconds. Gustav just still had his clenched fist outstretched as he breathed in and out profusely. I did it! I did it! I did it! I finally fought back. Gustav's mind was in a state of excitement as he remembered the feeling of his fist colliding with Ben's jaw. There was this sense of gratification and relief when he finally threw the punch. He felt he would have regretted it, had he not stood up for himself at this point. And he was right. Had Gustav not fought for himself, Hung Jo would have broken his arms, legs, and spine to make sure Gustav is unable to walk. This kind of injury can easily be healed nowadays, but he knew Gustav didn't have the money to buy what was necessary for healing, and he also knew that no one gave a damn about Gustav, so he might end up remaining a cripple for life. Host has achieved bravery. Gustav stared at the notification that popped up in his line of sight with a slight smile. So this was what I needed? You bastard! What are you laughing at? I will kill you! Paul shouted out and ran towards Gustav with his body morphing. Paul's body transformed into a large, half-man and half-bull figure. He grew to a height of 7 feet. 2 thick brown tusks could be seen protruding from both sides of his mouth. He sent out another fist towards Gustav again. Gustav could sense the significant increase in strength. Earlier, Gustav gauged their strengths to be significantly below his, but now, Paul was close to his current strength. Close but not as strong. The fist carried power and speed as it closed in on Gustav. I think it's high time I tested this. Activate dash. Dash has been activated. 20 points will be added to host current speed for the next 10 seconds. Dash 20 energy. Gustav squinted his eyes as everything and everywhere became kind of silent. He felt extremely light at the moment, almost like a gust of wind would be able to blow him across the cafeteria. The punch that was moving at an extremely fast pace earlier was now slow to the extent that it looked like he was watching a tortoise run. Time left before dash deactivates. 10, 9. Gustav saw the countdown and decided to move. I have to make use of this before time runs out. Immediately Gustav moved, he found himself on the other side behind Paul. Paul was surprised to see his fist suddenly miss and Gustav, no longer in front of him. The students in the cafeteria saw Gustav's fast movement that was similar to that of a phantom's, and started wondering how he was able to move that fast. Paul noticed Gustav's current position and turned around to throw several more fists at him. Swerve! 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 Gustav dodged them with ease and dashed forward. Gustav threw his right fist towards Paul's tummy. Pow! Paul felt the intense pain coming from his gut area and bent slightly due to the power of the punch. Pow! Immediately he bent, Gustav's left fist slammed into his jaw, making him slide backwards with blood oozing from his mouth. Ho w dre yo you bastard! Paul held onto his jaw, which was slightly shifted. Gustav didn't even waste time before dashing forward with incredible speed and punching out severally. Pow! 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 His fist traveled from right to left on Paul's body and from up to down. Gustav just kept punching Paul. His eyes, his nose, his mouth, his chest, his tummy, Paul was unable to follow Gustav's speed and remained on the brutal receiving end of Gustav's furious punches. This is for everything you people have done to me. Gustav's eyes shone craziness as he swung his fist towards Paul's left cheek. Pow! This time the punch was extremely heavy that Paul's huge body was thrown towards the side. Paul slammed onto the ground and transformed back into his normal form. He was bleeding from almost every part of his upper body. His eyes and lips were bloodied and swollen. 10. Dash has been deactivated. Even though Dash was deactivated, Gustav could feel an unknown rush of excitement coursing through his body. Is this how it feels to take revenge? Gustav wondered as he clenched his right fist, which was soaked in blood. It wasn't his blood, it was Paul's. For someone who had never seen anyone's blood except that of himself, Gustav was surprisingly calm and didn't freak out. He suddenly swerved to the side as he felt something. 2. A light fluorescent beam passed by his left and slammed into the table where 4 students were seated. Bam! Kyar! Screams were heard as the entire table crashed, and a huge scorched hole could be seen in the middle. Gustav turned around and noticed the beam was fired by Hung Jo. When Gustav was dealing with Ben earlier, Hung Jo had used a healing solution. Healing solutions were small bottled medicines that healed physical injuries immediately upon consumption. It was expensive, but since Hung Jo had an influential background, he could purchase it with ease. Hung Jo had drunk one of these a while ago, causing his broken hand to heal back. A bright fluorescent light covered Hung Ja's outstretched hand. It could be seen that light rays were currently gathering from every part of the cafeteria and conveying towards Hung Ja's outstretched arm. Chapter 13. You will pay for breaking my hand, you trash! Hung Jo looked like he was really mad as he shot out a large fluorescent beam towards Gustav's position. Activate dash, Gustav called out in his mind. The sounds in the air reduced. The feeling of lightness circulated around his insides, making him feel refreshed. The beam headed towards him was quite fast, yet it was no match for dash. Tush! Gustav dodged to the side and dashed forward with speed. Tush! Tush! The students could barely catch a glimpse of his figure as he dodged Hung Ja's repeated attacks. Pow! A loud striking sound resounded across the cafeteria again as Gustav's fist collided with Hung Ja's stomach. Blurg! Hung Jo vomited out blood, with his eyes widening in pain, as his figure was sent flying across the cafeteria in the form of an arc blam. Hung Jo landed on a cafeteria table that was empty and ended up causing it to collapse. He was the strongest among the 3, yet he was defeated so easily. Apart from the indescribable pain he was feeling in his tummy region, he felt like his reputation had also gone down the drain. Gustav stood in place while staring at his fist. This feeling. I can't get enough of it. I want to make them suffer more. I want to snuff them out of existence with my hands. These were Gustav's dark thoughts, but he quickly cast them aside. I must learn how to control myself. I will not lose my humanity in the process of becoming powerful, but I will still make sure I teach them an unforgettable lesson. Gustav started walking towards where Hung Jo landed. Step! 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 The students stared at him with a disbelieving expression. He just defeated the 3 of them with ease. They felt like they couldn't recognize the person in front of them as they watched Gustav walk towards Hung Jo. Hung Jo had a scared look as he saw Gustav standing before him. He remembered the fierce punch that almost tore through his belly. How did you? Trash! He didn't complete the words before Gustav interrupted. You still have the guts to call me trash? Trash just defeated you, so what should you be called? Gustav questioned with a dark look. I am not done with you yet! Hung Jo shouted out as he tried to stand up. His legs wobbled and blood oozed out the side of his mouth as he tried standing up. Just as he was about to fall again, he heard Gustav speak. Let me help you. Gustav reached out to grab Hung Ja's right hand and help in lifting him. Hung Jo wasn't expecting that, and was about to say something when he felt Gustav's hand tightening around his hand. Crack! Kyr! Hung Jo screamed out as his hand got broken again, and he fell to the floor. Oh! My hand! Jairer! Snot was flowing out of his nose as he felt tremendous pain than he felt earlier. Since I started this already. Even if there will be consequences, I will enjoy every second before it comes to an end. Hung Jo, your legs look like they need some help also. Gustav had an innocent look as he stared at the screaming Hung Jo. Hung Jo kept holding onto his hand as he stared at Gustav, wondering what he meant by that, but in the next second another scream rang out from his mouth. Kairar! Gustav's right foot stomped on Hung Ja's left leg, causing it to bend to another angle. I think my leg slipped. Gustav left school almost in the evening on this day. The disciplinary committee office was where he spent the remaining half of the day. Gustav, how could you harm your classmates? It was self-defense. Self-defense, you say? Why were all his fingers and limbs broken when we found him? Dash. You must be severely punished for this. Dash. If you weren't the sibling of the best middle school student, you would have been expelled. Dash. From henceforth you are not permitted to be anywhere within 100 feet from Hangzhou. Dash. You are to tender an apology to him in front of the entire school while being on your knees. Dash. You must work in the cooking lounge school kitchen for the next 2 months as part of your punishment. Dash. Also you must join the cleaners in keeping the school clean. Dash. Fighting with anyone during your punishment period is punishable by expulsion. Gustav gritted his teeth in anger as he remembered the conversation with the 4 disciplinary teachers. Where were they when I was being bullied repeatedly? When Hangzhou broke my fingers, when Yahiko nearly crushed me to death? Where were they to judge the accident? Gustav was feeling very angered right now. Just when he felt he could finally come out of his shell after gaining this power, these people were trying to force him back into it. They all deserved to suffer. Gustav remembered when he was brought into the office by some teachers who later arrived in the cafeteria. The 4 disciplinary teachers asked him repeatedly how he did it. They suspected he used an enhancement drug, but enhancement drugs that could make a useless mixed blood defeat a group of 3 mixed blood was unheard of. Especially when one of them was a C grade and the remaining 2 were D grades. They kept asking with smiles on their faces where Gustav got it from. They felt he came into possession of some by mistake maybe and wanted to see if they could extort some from him. Such products were not cheap and would cost at least $500,000, so they were thinking of selling if he confessed and relinquished the items to them. Unfortunately, Gustav told them he didn't own such drugs and that he had been training. This was the truth, but they felt he was bullshitting and passed down judgment upon him. Bunch of corrupt. Gustav wanted to curse, but he held it in. He had expected that there would be consequences after unleashing his anger, yet he was still incredibly stirred up by the punishments. It's only for now. I just have to endure a little bit more. He was powerless to stop their judgments, and he still needed to graduate from the school if he wished to join the MBO. One of his reasons for wanting to join the MBO was, he had always wanted to be a hero of mankind from small. Now he was starting to doubt if the Earth deserved to have a hero. Whether they even deserved to be protected. Still, that wouldn't stop him from wanting to join the MBO. As Gustav was running home, a new notification popped up in his line of sight. Host has completed the hidden quest. Huh! What's this? Chapter 14. Read the author's note below for the explanation on the differences between speed and agility. Host has completed the hidden quest. Huh! What's this? Gustav paused his steps as he saw the notification. Dash. Get out of the way, kid! His stopping in the middle of the walkway caused some people to voice out in dissatisfaction. Gustav only moved to the side and found a sidewalk bench to sit on. This sidewalk bench was about 100 meters away from the next teleportation circle which Gustav was supposed to travel through. Gustav stared at the notification as he Saturday. Host has completed hidden quest. Hidden quest details. 3 people have shown malicious intent towards you. Kill/inflict serious injuries on them. Quest rewards, 1000 EXP, plus 2 additional attributes point added to all stats. Genetic transformation bloodline upgrade, level up. Gustav stared at the system with a surprised look. Turns out dealing with them brought multiple rewards, Gustav said with a smile. Gustav didn't regret one bit of what he did. If he was given the chance to do it again, he would even make the experience worse for those 3 since he knew he would be punished either way. Gustav opened the system interface to check his current stats. Host attributes: name Gustav Oslov, level 3 class, EXP 1500/2000 HP, 150/150 energy, 20/50. Attributes: Strength 15, Perception 13, Agility 12, Speed 14, Bravery 7, Intelligence 14, Charm null. Attributes .0. He had checked bravery when he was being judged in the disciplinary committee and was surprised to see the amount. At that time his bravery went straight up to 5. It didn't start with 1 like the other stats. Gustav could really feel the improvement within his body. It had been almost 2 weeks since he got the system. Seeing the speed of his transformation made him believe that in the next 6 months he would have gotten to the Zulu rank. Gustav decided to check the Skills and Abilities panel. Skills and Abilities: Level 2 Regeneration, Level 1 Morph, Level 1 Toxin Immunity, Level 1 Recreation, Level 1 Bloodline Acquisition, Level 1. His eyes focused on Dash for a few seconds before a piece of information popped up beneath it. Level 2 Ability to increase current speed by 25 for 10 seconds. This means the power of Dash has increased by 25%, Gustav calculated. His current speed without Dash gave him the ability to travel up to 5 feet in a single movement. His full speed right now without using Dash is comparable to Earth's fastest man in the past. In fact, he was slightly faster than him. If he decided to use Dash now, 25 points would be added to his speed. Gustav had a feeling of excitement just thinking about it, but he couldn't use it right now since his energy was low. Using Dash earlier consumed 20 energy points. He was sure that the consumption rate would have increased now that Dash leveled up. Gustav decided to open the Bloodline panel to check his Bloodline upgrade. Bloodlines: Genetic Transformation Bloodline, Grade F. Abilities tied to Bloodline, Morph. Gustav smiled as he noticed the grade, which was always null earlier, had now changed to F. This means my bloodline can keep increasing in grade. Gustav had this suspicion earlier, but now that he was seeing it with his eyes, he was now totally convinced. Last week when he checked out the bloodline category, he saw Genetic Transformation Bloodline. The name made him feel confused, but after some time he understood that this was the name of his current useless bloodline. This name was something he had never encountered before in all his years of reading about the different types of bloodlines. Not only was it unknown, but it was also considered to be below F grade until he got the system. When he checked it earlier, null, but now it was F grade. Gustav wondered what this upgrade had improved within him, but he didn't notice any differences. After checking for a while, he shrugged his shoulders. Maybe I won't see it just yet, he thought. I wonder if when I steal a bloodline I will also be able to upgrade it with this system? Gustav wondered out loud. There was no one to answer the ton of questions he had now regarding this new power, but he believed that with time he would slowly come to understand how things work. Gustav decided to head home at this point so he could complete his daily task. He was lucky not to find anyone at home again, but this time he started wondering why Hendrik and his mother had been coming late. After thinking for a while he decided not to sweat it and started lifting the couch. This time Gustav was able to lift the entire couch together. The 2-seaters in his left hand and the 3-seater in his right hand. HNN! 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 There was no trace of discomfort on his face as he lifted them up. It looked almost natural, and to him, the sofas felt light. After lifting them up and down for a few minutes, a notification rang in his mind. Daily task completed. 3/3 carry a total of 1750 kilograms. Gustav did the usual, distributing the attributes points evenly. He changed out of his school uniform into a tight brown singlet and short green boxers. He brought out a small button from his pants pocket as he sat inside his tub. The button was blue. It looked like a regular button for clothes, especially t-shirts, but when Gustav tapped on the surface twice, it emitted a 2 feet tall projection. This truly brought me more rewards than punishment. He stared at the projection with stars in his eyes. I've never seen so much money in my entire life, Gustav said in excitement. Oh wait. I've never actually held money before, he said while holding his chin. On the projection, there was a bundle of green and white notes, a weird square-shaped silvery board, and a triangular-shaped mirror-like device. Gustav tapped the bundle of green notes displayed within the projection, and something magical happened. Sing! The bundle of notes appeared in physical form within his tub. Gustav stretched out his hand and picked up a bundle. This button was a technological storage device that every VIP student within the school had access to. It was able to keep things inside it for easy movement and transportation. Gustav didn't own one, but his brother did. Extra fees were paid before the school would grant one to the student. His parents considered it a waste for him to receive one, so they didn't pay extra fees for VIP. This particular one he was holding on to belonged to Hung Jo. He took it off Hung Jo after breaking all his limbs. Just as he expected of a billionaire son, there was a lot of money inside. So, this is how money feels like. Gustav rubbed the notes within his palms repeatedly. He kneaded, squeezed, and bent them in different angles. If the bundle of notes was a female, it would have shouted out, "Harassment!" After a while, Gustav stopped. There's nothing special about it, really. Apart from power, this also controls the world, yet it's just an ordinary piece of paper. Gustav was having a hard time comprehending this. He decided to put it at the back of his mind. Well, it is still very useful. I will accept this as part of the compensation for destroying my lunch and all those many years of bullying, Gustav said as he picked up the money and moved them back to the projection. When the money made contact with the projection, it was sucked in. Gustav sighed as he wondered how the next 2 months were gonna be because of the punishment, but in the next second he scoffed at it. Is it not to clean and cook? I shall learn. Gustav was confident that he would be able to pull through just fine, no matter how it went. He decided to stop worrying and go to sleep. In a dark study, calm, the sound of a male shoe heel colliding against the floor could be heard. A man in a blue business suit walked amid large shelves that were stacked with books. The study hallway was more than 500 feet long. The number of shelves placed on both sides was numbering in the 50s, and they were very tall. At the front of the study, another man could be seen sitting on a reading chair. The man had silver-colored spiky hair and a long pointy dark horn beneath his jaw. In front of the reading chair was a study table, and a book was wide open on top of it. The sound of page flipping was heard as the man used his finger to brush against the bottom of the large book. Why do you disturb my reading, young? The man spoke with an aged but powerful tone. Father, why did you withdraw the agent I sent out to investigate that issue? The man in a blue business suit paused his steps and questioned as he stood several feet behind the man with the spiky silver hair. Is that why you have come here? Chapter 15. Father, why did you withdraw the agent I sent out to investigate that issue? The man in a blue business suit paused his steps and questioned as he stood several feet behind the man with the spiky silver hair. Is that why you have come here? The man with the spiky silvery hair questioned with a low tone. Father, my guts tell me we missed something. The man known as Young said with a convincing look. You come over to disturb my reading just because of what your guts say? The father of the man questioned with a threatening tone. Father, it's no. Before Young could complete his statement, his father interrupted him. You know what my guts say? My guts say you should leave this useless thinking of yours and find something productive to spend your time with. Young wanted to retort when his father continued. My guts also say you should leave my study. You've spent too much time here. After his father said that, he went back to reading his book. Young stood behind him with a look of dissatisfaction, but he knew his father well. Once he spoke like this, it meant the conversation was over and there was no longer room for argument. I will excuse myself, father. He bowed slightly and turned around to leave the study. The father didn't even reply. Only the sound of pages being flipped through broke the silence within the room. Young walked out of the study and arrived in a brightly lit corridor. The walls had luxurious designs and paintings hung on them. He turned towards the left to walk forward. A male in a black bodysuit with a broad and muscular build was seen coming from the other end. Young paused his footsteps after noticing this person. The male had half of his face covered with a green mask. He gave a standing bow when he got to the front of Young. Young Master Young, I bring reports. The man spoke with a hoarse but slightly deep voice. Am listening. Young gave the go-ahead for him to speak. Everyone rounded up within the vicinity of that mountain range have been tested and investigated properly. None of them know anything out of the ordinary about what happened to the mountain. The green-masked man answered. Not a single person? Young asked. Those who witnessed it said a star descended upon the mountain and that was it. We used the brain tweak device to confirm this. The green-masked man replied again. So the energy surge was just misread? How is that possible when it had the same ratings with that? Young suddenly remembered something as he was in the process of speaking. Wasn't there a student that you let slip from your fingers? Yun asked with a glare. Yes, but he was just a kid, so I believe he's inconsequential. The green-masked man answered. Inconsequential? That's the excuse incompetent fools like yourself come up with after failing a task. Young voiced out with a slight look of annoyance. The green-masked man was startled by his sudden remark and started apologizing. I apologize, young Master Young. It wasn't an intention of mine. Young calmed down and stared at the guard. Truly, just as you have said, the fellow is a kid, but I don't like to leave any loopholes. Get him and bring him in for an inspection. Young commanded. As you wish, young master. 5:00A. And Gustav woke up the next morning to see a new notification appear in his line of sight. New quest has been issued. Gustav rubbed his sleepy eyes and checked the contents of the quest. His eyes shone a baffled look as he checked out the information and the rewards attached. After a few seconds, he shrugged his shoulders. I wonder why it would want me to do this. Oh well, it doesn't matter so long as the rewards are bountiful. After checking it out completely, Gustav stood up and went to prepare for school. In a few minutes, he was ready. At this time, the skies were still dark. Gustav was the first person to leave home since it was still as early as past 5. The reason for this was, his punishment would start today. Even though it was still early, the streets and the sidewalks still had people moving from place to place. The streets and roads were brightly lit, so moving around when it was dark was no issue. From when Gustav left the house, he had changed his skin tone to a dark color. He ran across the walkways with speed, causing his uniform to make flapping noises, and part of it swole up due to wind entering through spaces. Gustav stopped in front of a small shop. This shop was originally a bakery shop, but right now they hadn't opened. Gustav sighed as he stared at the bungalow-type shop. The shop was built in form of a large pink cake with blue and green stripes. Whenever Gustav was heading to school or returning home, he would pass by this shop, and the aroma of foods being baked would waft into his nostrils, making his mouth water. Gustav had always wanted to come here and try one of their bakes, but alas, he never had a single penny in hand. Now that there's a bit of cash in my possession, I can't get access to you, Gustav said in a dejected tone. He would be leaving home to school early from now on thanks to the punishment, which means he would not meet the shop opened. He also had no idea about the time he would leave school. Gustav turned around and started heading back to school. In a few minutes he arrived at school. The school was an empty vast land at this time. No one could be seen coming in or going out. Gustav headed for the gate, which was closed up. Immediately he got to it, a red ray of light shot out for the top and scanned him from head to toe. After a few seconds the light turned green and the gate opened up mechanically. Gustav went inside and started running towards the disciplinary committee office. During his travel, Gustav took the time to appreciate the splendid environment around him. He passed by a large soccer pitch. He took time to stare at it for a little while, admiring its beauty before he continued forward. Basketball field, volleyball, etc. Echelon Academy had almost everything, but Gustav never had the opportunity to visit any one of them. The last place he passed through before getting to the disciplinary committee office was a large hall. This large hall was no smaller than 3 football pitches joined together. Gustav recognized this place. It was a place he had always wanted to visit. It was the hall where mixed bloods received training within the school. The Mixed Blood Training Hall. The mixed blood had their type of extracurricular activities, and coming here to train was a part of it, but Gustav had never been able to come here. Since his parents didn't pay extra fees for him, he wasn't given access to this place, and so many others. Since he only went through a part of the school, he didn't pass through other structures that mixed blood had access to, like the dueling grounds and techniques library. After a few more minutes, Gustav arrived at the disciplinary committee office. He met a teacher there who handed him a timetable of how his punishment was gonna be. After checking it out and receiving the cold instructions and glare of the teacher, Gustav headed towards the school kitchen on the southwest of the school. In a few minutes he arrived there. "You're finally here. I hope you are ready to work those hands." A short, stoic man wearing an apron and a white hat spoke with a loud, thin voice. This man was the head chef of this kitchen, and Gustav was assigned to working with him. On entering the kitchen, which was pretty large, Gustav could see many cooks. This was the first he was entering a kitchen. He hardly even entered the one in the house, so it was a new experience for him to see large fires, the scent of foods as they were being cooked, etc. Everything was new to him. Gustav swallowed a gulp of saliva. Does this mean I might have access to a lot of food now? The chief chef, who everyone called Boss Danzo, gave him simple tasks from the start, telling him to put a kettle on the fire. Boss Danzo had been told to make sure Gustav went through heinous tasks, but Boss Danzo's thought process was, you all want to ruin my kitchen. I will not let that happen. During his first day, Gustav was only tasked with menial chores. Offloading cooking materials, lifting some heavy equipment needed for one thing or the other, boiling water, etc. Boss Danzo watched him perform these tasks as days went by. With time passing, he would increase Gustav's work and start teaching him some easy cooking techniques. Host has learned cooking skill, boiling water. Host has learned cooking skill, cutting onions. Host has learned cooking skill, boiling oil. Host has learned cooking skill, frying pickled eggs. At first, when Gustav started, these shameful notifications would pop up in his line of sight. He was surprised to find out that any skill he learned manually would be added to his skills and abilities. As days went by, Boss Danzo noticed that Gustav had the potential for cooking and started teaching him. Turn the dough this way. Add the oil. Stir softly. Idiot, put out the fire. Do you want to burn down my kitchen? In a blink of an eye, another 5 days had passed. Gustav's activities during this time were working in the school kitchen early in the morning and cleaning the school after school hours. The cleaning wasn't much of a task since they were technological machines and tools that made it very easy. The only challenge was, the school was very large and Gustav was given a large portion of places to clean. The structures he was told to clean were always far apart from one another, so he would have to travel all around the school premises just to complete them while also carrying cleaning equipments. But what these people didn't know was, they were giving him the opportunity to complete his daily tasks easily, like this, which has risen in difficulty in the past few days. He would attend class after spending some hours in the school kitchen. Gustav didn't need to apologize to Hung Jo because, since that day, Hung Jo didn't show up in school. Wherever Gustav went, some students would give him frightful stares while some would look at him with disgust. The incident in the cafeteria already spread throughout the school. They had justified the incident, saying, Gustav used a bloodline enhancement drug to fight against the three. Gustav was now more popular than ever. They discussed him daily, but no one dared to approach him. They all feared that he still had more of those drugs and they didn't want to be on the receiving end like Hung Jo. Chapter 16. After school hours, Gustav was heading towards the teacher's block C to go clean their offices. In his hand was a rectangular-looking technological device. It was black and had 2 circular holes on both sides. This was a cleaning device. It weighed about 220 kilograms. Normally the device had a wheel to allow easy movement, but the one given to Gustav had the wheels purposely removed by the head cleaner of the school. They had expected Gustav to have a hard time lifting it, but were disappointed when Gustav lifted it with ease. Gustav was currently using his right hand to hold onto it while it was placed on his right side. After walking for about 10 minutes and passing through several blocks, Gustav finally arrived at the teacher's block C. It was a 2-story luxurious-looking academic building. It was painted cream and had designs of different sorts on it. At this time, teachers were already leaving the school to their homes, which made it easier for Gustav to go from office to office while cleaning. This was the first time Gustav was tasked to clean the teachers' offices located in Block C. Gustav found it easy to clean most of these offices because they were neat most of the time. He started from downstairs, going from office to office. When he entered an office, he would place the device on the ground and press a button underneath it. Zun! Scanning environment for pollution! A robotic-like voice would be heard, and after a few seconds, it would be heard again. Pollution found! Commencing cleansing! The machine would emit an aqua-colored light that filled the entire office. Every form of dirt right to the last particles would be incinerated by the light. It was around 5 p.m. in the evening at this time, and Gustav had cleaned about 3 other buildings before coming here. This was the last building he was meant to clean for the day. After about 30 minutes, Gustav was almost done cleaning every office on this block. He was currently walking through a corridor on the first floor headed towards the office at the end. He got to the door after a few seconds and looked at the top. At the top corner, there was a rectangular tag that where the name of the teacher to whom the office belonged was written. This is Miss Amy's office? Gustav noticed the name on the tag at the top of the door. Gustav brought out a small metal square and placed it before the door. Catch him! Immediately Gustav opened the door and walked in. His eyes widened. What appeared in his line of sight was a beautiful female sporting long gray hair standing in front of a brown leather sofa. She was currently in tightly fitted sky blue jeans while trying to put on a white t-shirt. The reason for Gustav's shocked reaction was, the female standing in front had half of her body exposed. Her belly button along with her smooth and flat tummy was visible. Gustav could also see her green lacy bra, which did not do well to hide the cups underneath. The female, who was obviously changing into another where before he came in, paused and glared at him. Me? Gustav exclaimed as he turned around quickly and closed the door while dropping the equipment in his hand. Crash! Huff! 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 I'm dead! Gustav started running towards the stairs. Tap! 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 You think you can just run after peeking at my body like that? Gustav heard the cold voice of Miss Amy from behind. Gustav's speed was currently very fast enough to outrun the fastest of athletes, yet Miss Amy caught up with him immediately. Gustav felt a hand try to grab onto him from behind. He quickly moved his body to the left, dodging the hand by a hairbreadth, but before he could move further, the same hand suddenly moved swiftly toward the right. Gustav was fast, but he wasn't fast enough to dodge this, and before he could even activate dash, the hand grabbed onto his neck and lifted him. Gustav was like a little chick who was incapable of doing anything once he was grabbed. A few moments later, inside Miss Amy's office, Gustav was kneeling in front of the sofa with Miss Amy sitting on it while her legs were crossed. So you came to clean my office and didn't even bother to knock before pushing the doors open? Miss Amy stated with a fierce look. Miss Amy, it wasn't my intention. Other teachers have left the school. I didn't know that you would still be around. Gustav explained without hurry. Now that he was calm, he felt that running might have been a little too extreme. He felt he should have just explained it to her first, since Miss Amy wasn't as unreasonable as most of the staff in the school. So you weren't told? Miss Amy asked with an intense glare. Told what, Miss Amy? Gustav asked with an obvious look of confusion. Miss Amy stared at Gustav's expression with a straight look. I take care of cleaning my office by myself, Miss Amy stated. Gustav finally understood why the head cleaner was smiling at him after telling him to go clean Block C. I wasn't told, Gustav replied honestly while raging in his heart. That old man set me up. Miss Amy's gaze softened up a little after reading Gustav's expression and realizing he was saying the truth. Still, that's no reason for you to just barge in. Learn how to knock next time, Miss Amy added. Yes, I apologize once again, Gustav said. Originally he was just excited since this was the last place he was supposed to clean for the day, which was why he forgot to knock. Now you can go. Miss Amy decided to release him. Gustav stood up and bowed slightly before walking towards the door. Miss Amy watched him leave with a contemplative gaze showing on her face. His demeanor has changed. She stared intently at Gustav's movement. She had noticed that his manner of speaking, walking, and even his outward appearance was now different from before. Something is going on with this kid, Miss Amy noted after scrutinizing him properly. Gustav pulled the door open and walked out. Just as he wanted to close it, Miss Amy called out to him. "Gustav, come here!" Gustav heard her call and went back in. What is it, Miss Amy?" he questioned with a slightly baffled look. "Return this book to Library D for me." She picked up a red-covered book beside her and threw it towards Gustav, who was still standing at the door. Fruh! The book moved across the air with a fast speed, headed towards Gustav's face. Grab! Gustav caught the book just as it was 3 inches away from making contact with his face. "All right." Gustav nodded with a slight smile and walked out. Click! The door closed up and Gustav's figure was no longer visible, but Miss Amy was still staring at the door. "Something is definitely up with that kid," he even smiled. Miss Amy noticed some things that weren't present before. Gustav picked up the equipment he dropped outside Miss Amy's office and pushed the button beneath it. Zun! Scanning environment for pollution! The robotic voice sounded out again. Gustav sighed in relief after seeing that the machine was still functioning and pressed the button again to switch it off. He dropped it earlier due to shock. While Miss Amy was reprimanding him earlier, his mind was on the machine, hoping it wouldn't experience any kind of fault so he wouldn't have to spend his stolen compensation money on buying new cleaning equipment for the school. He held the red-covered book in his left hand and proceeded to walk out of the building. A slight frown hung on his face as he walked. "Miss Amy was testing me," Gustav said in a low voice. This was something he noticed when she threw the book towards him. The speed at which she threw it was enough to knock a full-grown man out upon contact. If this was Gustav's former self, he would have been knocked out cold since his eyes wouldn't even be able to follow the speed of the book. His head would have nearly been uprooted from his neck. "I need to avoid her." Gustav came to this conclusion. Gustav thought about the consequences of someone finding out about him having the system, and it scared him to imagine the horrors that would befall him. This didn't mean he was going to hide like a coward and pretend like he didn't have strength, but he planned to tread with caution until he finally made it into the MBO training camp. Gustav walked towards the cleaner's lounge to go drop the equipment before heading towards Library D. Gustav held the book up and stared at the cover. "History of Year 2076. Gustav squinted his eyes as he saw the name. "Isn't that the same year the Slarkovs were said to descend upon the Earth?" Chapter 17. History of Year 2076. Gustav squinted his eyes as he saw the name. "Isn't that the same year the Slarkovs were said to descend upon the Earth?" Gustav questioned with an intrigued look. "She said Library D." Gustav's eyes widened as he came to a realization. "That's the library only accessible to VIP mixed bloods." Gustav found a tree by the roadside and sat underneath it. He stared at the book in his hands again. "That's why I've never seen this one." Gustav spoke as he turned the book to the side, checking every part of it. Gustav had visited the libraries that were accessible to normal students, and also read a lot of books, but he never for once saw a book that had the history of the past as big as this. Every history book that gave information on the time of the Slarkovs' descent was never more than 3 pages full. Those history books never gave a lot of information. Only the ones known by the masses were available there. Gustav had always wanted to know more and sensed that a lot of information was missing, but since he was never given access to the better libraries, he had to make do with what he had. Gustav was intrigued, so he opened the book and started flipping through the pages. The first information that he saw talked about how humans were starting to make progress in technology, and were proud of their findings until the Slarkovs descended with 1,000 large spaceships that were half the size of a moon. Their descent made the humans realize that aliens existed, and also the appearance of the Slarkovs was one that even the most technologically advanced space station couldn't detect. The Slarkovs descended without a single spaceship being detected. What gave them away when they arrived in the Earth's atmosphere, and their large spaceships could be seen from the Earth's surface? Gustav flipped to the next page. He had completed the first page in less than a minute. He continued reading with an intrigued look. Humans who thought the Slarkovs were a threat fired all their artilleries, missiles e.t.c. towards the spaceships as they descended. Nothing worked. The spaceships were impervious to every single weapon the humans possessed. Humanity realized at this point that their technology was still lacking even though improvements had been made. The Slarkovs, who didn't understand the human tongue at first, used their technology to download humanity history while descending. Every human being within the planet had their brains picked and information was gathered for the consumption of the Slarkovs. After that, they could speak the human tongue and understood human culture. The Slarkovs descended upon several continents with their mini-ships. The humans, who were obviously still stupid, sacrificed many locations in the world by sending nukes just so they could rid the Earth of Slarkovs. People died, but the Slarkovs remained alive because they were being protected by an energy field. After numerous failed attempts to destroy the Slarkovs, humans gave up and succumbed to their fate. The first chief of the Slarkovs and other dignitaries from the world government had a meeting to discuss how the ruling of the Slarkovs will be and how humans were ready to serve them so long as they weren't killed. Surprisingly, the chief of the Slarkovs, Lord Frembolton the 88th, explained to the world government how the humans had misunderstood their descent. He explained the reason for their migration was because of their planet, bad, destruction, and they weren't here to put the humans in bondage, but to coexist peacefully. To show their sincerity, the Slarkovs presented the world government with a piece of technological equipment. This was where humans realized that the Slarkovs were a peaceful race, and they had just killed their kind for nothing. Even though the Slarkovs had the power to bring the whole of humanity to their knees, they decided to live equally among the humans. The Slarkovs also decided to sign a treaty with the humans telling them they would give anything in exchange for staying on the Earth. The humans, who had realized that the Slarkovs' technology far surpassed theirs, decided to exchange permission for knowledge. This year was known as the transitioning of mankind. That same year chaos ensued as large meteorites hit the Earth's surface. The parts in the world where these meteorites hit should have caused a lot of people to perish, but it was already predicted, so the inhabitants of these places had already been moved out. After these meteorites landed in several parts of the Earth, a surprisingly magical phenomenon happened. The meteorites caused those parts of the Earth to cave in, creating some kind of underground ruins. It was later discovered that these meteorites were parts of the Slarkovs' home planet that was destroyed. The underground ruins were later explored by scientists, and new energy was found there. The energy was called Hue of Crystal. The Hue of Crystals actually came from the destruction of the Slarkovs' home planet. Gustav noted this piece of information. This was where humanity's progression in the field of energy began. Gustav flipped through the last page with a look of disappointment. "That's it," Gustav lamented. He could still tell that there was more information withheld. Gustav had just finished a book with about 100 pages and 20,000 words in 20 minutes. Everything written there was plastered in the walls of his mind. He still wished to find out more. When he closed the book, he noticed a small set of letters carved out beneath the back cover. Vol 1. Gustav read it out with a smile. "This means there's another volume." Gustav stood up and dusted his uniform. I probably won't be allowed to take or read any book in Library D." Gustav thought about how he would solve this issue. After a few seconds of contemplating, he decided to head to Library D. It was around 15 minutes to 6 in the evening at this time. It would take Gustav at least another 20 minutes of walking to get to Library D. "The librarian will probably be leaving soon, so I can't take that long to get there," Gustav thought as he prepared to use Dash. He looked around him, checking the surroundings properly. After noticing that no one was in the vicinity, he turned towards the right where a long curved road could be seen ahead. "Activate Dash." Immediately he called out in his mind. The sounds in the environment became fleeting again. The feeling of lightness enveloped his body again. Gustav crouched his legs a bit before dashing forward. Swoosh! He streaked across the path with speed, following the curvy road. With every movement he traveled more than 100 feet, dashing past the trees on the sides of the road. The trees were a bit distant from one another, but he was able to cross from the first one to the next in a second. The winds blew his hair backward and made his uniform disordered, yet this was a feeling that he would never trade for the world. Dash has been deactivated. The timer for Dash came to an end for the third time as Gustav arrived in front of a large rhombus-shaped building. This building was painted brown and white. It was like a hall, but it looked like two slanted rhombuses joined together. Gustav went towards the entrance where a male security guard was stationed. "Show me your VIP badge." "It's you? You are not allowed here. Leave at once." The male guard recognized Gustav, the supposed trash of the entire school, and his expression turned fierce. "Miss Amy asked me to return this." Gustav raised the book in his hand. The guard stared at the book with a surprised look. "Miss Amy asked you to return it? Are you sure?" The guard's expression became a bit tense when Miss Amy's name was mentioned. "Maybe I should just head back to her office and tell her a security guard blocked me from performing the task she sent me," Gustav said and turned around to leave. The guard's face became more tensed and panicky as he reached out to grab Gustav. "Hey, when did I stop you? Come on, head in." The security guard gave a forced smile as he permitted Gustav to head in. Gustav nodded and walked into the library. Immediately he entered what appeared in his line of sight were long rows and columns of 3-meter shelves spaced neatly across the room. The length of the room was large that Gustav couldn't see the end from his position. The floors, the walls, the light, everything looked marvelous, making Gustav wonder if he just entered heaven. Library D was different from the rest of the other libraries. Gustav started walking forward with a look of astonishment. He was still in a daze as he walked amid these bookshelves. "Hey, what are you doing here?" a female voice questioned, bringing him out of his reverie. Chapter 18. "Hey, what are you doing here?" a female voice questioned, bringing him out of his reverie. Gustav turned towards the right. 3 columns to the right, a lady sporting black hair, in a pink tight-fitted gown, was walking toward him. She wore a monocle on her right eye. She looked to be in her mid-20s, only a little bit older than Miss Amy. Difference was she was married and not as beautiful. "I have never seen you here before. Who let you in?" the female questioned with a glare. Surprisingly, she didn't recognize Gustav's face. This was because she was the librarian of Library D, Mrs. Pottery. She stayed in the library all of the time. "Miss Amy asked me to return this." Gustav raised the book as he replied. "Miss Amy sent you?" Mrs. Pottery scrutinized Gustav from head to toe as she asked with a look of disbelief. Gustav nodded in affirmation. "Let me see that," she said and took the book from Gustav. "Yes, she did borrow this," Mrs. Pottery said after checking out the book. She lowered the book down and noticed that Gustav was no longer in front of her. He had already walked further and was currently checking out a shelf ahead. "Yes, why are you still here?" Mrs. Pottery questioned with a glare again. "You have completed your errand, now you can leave," she stated as she walked towards Gustav. Gustav, who was currently checking out the books on the shelf in front of him with a serious look, didn't even bother to give her a reply. Not here, not there." Gustav's eyes roamed across the shelf as his fingers moved swiftly, pulling books forward and pushing them back once he found out that they weren't what he was searching for. "Hey, did." Mrs. Pottery was about to say something when she was interrupted by Gustav. "I need the other volume of that book," Gustav voiced with an urgent look after realizing he couldn't check every single shelf here without spending hours. There were more than 1,000 bookshelves and each one was able to hold more than 1,000 books, both thick and thin. "You are not allowed to take any book from here," Mrs. Pottery stated with a fierce look. Gustav withdrew his hand from the shelf and turned to stare at Mrs. Pottery. All of a sudden he started walking towards her. Mrs. Pottery had a look of bafflement seeing him approach her. To her surprise, Gustav passed by her side and kept walking. She turned around to stare at his back as he moved further ahead. "You'll be sure to tell Miss Amy that you, Mrs. Pottery, stopped me from retrieving the book she wanted." She heard Gustav speak as he kept walking. Her eyes widened in fear after he said that. "Wait!" she called out to Gustav, causing him to pause in his steps. "I apologize for that, please let me get the next volume for you." Her tone suddenly turned respectful. Gustav, who still had his back facing her, grinned. It worked. 30 minutes later the skies were darkening and Gustav was already on his way home. In fact, he was almost home. His current skin tone was a brown one, and his hair color right now was black. He smiled as he recalled the last day's events. The Liberian had given him not just the next volume of the book but the rest of the volumes that came after that. There were 5 volumes in total. He already read the first volume, so he was given the other 4 volumes, and they were currently placed in the technological storage device he took from Hangzhou. This proves that some of the things I heard about Miss Amy might be true. Gustav wondered as he recalled the rumors that were always flying around about Miss Amy. A lot of students said she hated mixed bloods. He also heard a rumor about how she was formerly in the MBO before deciding to leave of her own accord, which made him wonder why she would ever think of leaving. He also heard about a time when Miss Amy came to school dressed in a casual outfit. She wasn't recognized due to that, and the security guard tried stopping her entry. It didn't end well for him since he was said to end up in the hospital with grievous injuries. She was also rumored to beat the librarian, Mrs. Pottery, up. Mrs. Pottery called her a vulgar and vile mixed blood. Due to both of them being mixed bloods and having the pride that came with being one, a fight ensued. Mrs. Pottery ended up being on the receiving end of Miss Amy's furious barrages. Miss Amy kicked, slapped, and smacked the living daylights out of Mrs. Pottery. Rumors said Mrs. Pottery wasn't able to touch a strand of Miss Amy's hair even though Mrs. Pottery was said to possess a B-grade bloodline and belonged to an affluent family. Miss Amy was the type who didn't care about any background. She would deal with anyone who dared to cause her trouble. She always got away with it, since she had the strength to back it up. The fear on Mrs. Pottery's face was real. I should use this to my advantage, but I also have to make sure that Miss Amy doesn't find out. Gustav came to this conclusion as he finally got home. No one's around again. Gustav noticed that the house was empty once again. He walked into his room and sat on the edge of his bed tub. Open system interface, Gustav called out. Host attributes, skills and abilities, bloodlines, quests, shop. The red panel appeared in his line of sight. Gustav stared at it for a little while. I wonder what level I have to get to before I can access shop. I can't wait to see what this shop function has to offer, Gustav stated with a look of anticipation. The first time he tried to access the shop, a notification popped up. Host hasn't reached the level required to access shop. Every time he leveled up, he always tried to access it. Host attributes, Gustav called out. Host attributes: name, Gustav Oslov, level, 4 class, EXP, 250/9500 HP, 170/170 energy, 40 ADS, attributes, Strength 23, Perception 21, Agility 20, Speed 22, Bravery 19, Intelligence 22, Charm null, attributes .0. 3 weeks had passed since Gustav started his punishment, and he would say it was going pretty well for him. What Gustav didn't know was his strength right now was higher than the average Zulu-ranked mixed blood, even though he wasn't a Zulu-ranked mixed blood yet. His intelligence had already outstripped those of his peers and normal adults. It was now comparable to that of scientists. He could analyze and recollect things with ease now. His thinking faculty was so fast right now that even in normal classes he answered technical science questions in seconds. The science teacher would always stare at him like he was a monster and sigh. If only he was a high-graded mixed blood. Even before Gustav was able to raise his intelligence with the system, the science teacher always had his eye on him, but just like the rest, he had to always ignore Gustav's achievements due to his low-grade bloodline. Gustav had completed today's task and also distributed the attribute points in the school. Right now he wanted to check his progress with the quest he received on the day he started his punishment. He closed the attributes panel and opened the quest panel. Quests, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. After the quest panel appeared in his line of sight, he called out. Monthly. 1 month quest. Change your hair color and skin tone every time you leave your abode and when outside of the school premises. Duration 15 to 30 days. Rewards 1000 EXP, 15 attributes points. Bloodline upgrade, random skill unlock. Gustav stared at the completion rate of the quest. 15 days more. Gustav was still baffled by the unique quest that made him use the morph ability when he was leaving home and school. Whenever he was outside the school, he wouldn't be recognized by any of his peers that saw him because of this. He felt maybe the system was trying to make him train his morph ability because he noticed that the morph ability could level up without the input of the system. He felt it was probably because it is tied to his bloodline and not one of the system-based abilities. Gustav decided to close the system interface and brought out the 4 books he got from the library. He held them together on top of one another. They were all red covers like the first volume, but the difference was the years placed on each front cover. History of the years 2077 to 2087. History of the years 2088 to 2098. History of the years 2099 to 2109. History of the years 2110 to 2120. Gustav read the characters on each cover with a contemplative look. "Looks like I'm not gonna get any sleep this night," Gustav exclaimed as he placed 3 out of the 4 books in his tub and held on to the last one. History of the years 2077 to 2087. Chapter 19. The next morning Gustav finally finished the last page of the last book. It was around 5 a.m. at this time. This has been an eye-opener. The general public hardly know anything about the past. Was this the government way of keeping information from a lot of people? After reading the history books, Gustav had suspicions because of the things he found out. There was a lot of information withheld from the general public. There were still more that he wished to know. The 5th volume only covered years 2110 to 2120. This was the year 4094. Gustav longed to know what happened after, and now he felt the world wasn't as simple as he thought. They were terrorist groups of mixed bloods that have been existing for centuries, creatures known as mixed breeds that were said to have their bloodline go haywire after defective awakening, etc. So many things that Gustav didn't know beforehand because the city he grew up in was a top-class one that hardly got infiltrated by criminals and the rest. How is it that the MBO is not able to handle all this? Gustav had always naively thought the MBO was powerful enough to handle everything related to mixed bloods criminalism. He had no idea that the world was even darker than he knew it to be. Ding! A notification popped up in his line of sight. Host has completed the goal. Read 1,000 books. What? Gustav stared at the notification with a shocked look. Goal? He had never seen the system bring up anything goal-related even after opening the system interface more than 1,000 times. This was the reason for his shocked reaction. Goal reward. Host has unlocked a new attribute, mental fortitude. Is this what scholars mean when they say knowledge is power? Gustav held his chin as he stared at the reward. Mental fortitude. I wonder how many points he'll get right off the bat for that. Gustav pondered as he opened the system interface and called for the attributes panel. Host attributes: name Gustav Oslov, level 4 class, EXP 250/9500 HP, 170/170 energy, 80/80 attributes: strength 23 perception, 21 mental fortitude, 2 agility, 20 speed, 22 bravery, 19 intelligence, 22 charm, null. Attributes .0. Just 2. Gustav was kind of disappointed after noticing the small figure placed in front of mental fortitude. He was expecting the number to shoot straight up like bravery, but it ended up being lesser. It's gonna take a while for me to raise it. Gustav held his chin as he calculated how many days and points it would take for mental fortitude to reach the rest. Gustav still wanted for each of his attributes to rise evenly, so for now he had decided to put off adding attributes to other stats till mental fortitude will have the same points with them. Gustav quickly went to prepare for school again today. 30 minutes later Gustav was on his way to school already, with his skin color being pale white and his hair color being green. He looked so much different from his usual self. Unrecognizable also. What Gustav didn't know was, his height was increasing and his body size was becoming bulkier by the day. If anyone compared him to how he looked last month, they would see the changes. Gustav got to school and headed for the school kitchen immediately. When he got in, he met Boss Danzo moving from place to place while giving instructions. "You're late, kid," Boss Danzo said and threw an apron towards Gustav's position. Gustav caught it and wore it with a smile. "Good morning to you too, Boss Danzo," Gustav greeted after he finished wearing the apron. "Huh! Wipe that cheeky smile off your face, I'm not falling for it," Boss Danzo shouted out as he turned towards the left. This caused Gustav to smile even more. "Sure, Boss Danzo," he replied as he walked towards the large cooking equipment placed in front. In the past 15 days, Gustav and Boss Danzo had built a kind of relationship that Gustav had never shared with anyone. The 15 days were supposed to be filled with torture, instead, he was enjoying it. Boss Danzo always treated him like he was a real staff. Boss Danzo was liked by everyone for many reasons. He never discriminated against anyone, always valued the input of every worker here, including Gustav. Gustav never thought a day would come when someone would utter the word, "Good job" to him, with a warm smile. Boss Danzo always gave him tons of food to eat, saying Gustav was too skinny and short. Gustav had really grown to like Boss Danzo. Also, he couldn't see the scheming and vileness in his eyes like the way he saw other people. Gustav stood in front of a rectangular cooking equipment with 17 different spots that were oozing out a blue fire. 10 big pots were placed on 9 of those spots. "I say to wipe off the cheeky smile, yet you decide to make it wider, what a brat," Boss Danzo said as he opened up one of the large cooking pots in front. SSHHHSSS. Steamy sounds enveloped the place. "You're gonna be making a tradashi dish today, combining the mutated fox chick, roasted duck, fried beans, and tomato sauce," Boss Danzo stated while walking towards where the food items needed were placed. Gustav's face turned serious as he saw the peeled skin of a dead chick that had a foxy-like head and tail, a freshly skinned duck, and some other foodstuffs needed. "Have a go at it, and don't burn down my kitchen." Boss Danzo tapped Gustav's back and went to stand by the side to observe his work. Gustav first washed his hands before he started. His right hand first went towards the body of the duck, and his left hand grabbed a knife. Chop! 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 In the blink of an eye, Gustav had already chopped the body of the duck to small pieces with the knife. After doing that, he opened one of the pots and threw them in. SSHHHSSS. The sounds of steaming could be heard again as Gustav's hand moved to the next item. Boss Danzo watched him from the side with a wild look. "This kid is really great," he thought internally with a smile. Suddenly he frowned once again as he remembered something. 30 minutes ago behind the kitchen building, Boss Danzo was having a conversation with a middle-aged fat man sporting brown hair. "I asked you to make sure he suffers. Give him a heavy workload. Why does it look like you haven't done any of that?" The man spoke with a look of anguish. "Mr. Lon, he was sent here as punishment to work in this kitchen, and he is doing just that," Boss Danzo replied the man. "Oh, is that how you have decided to play it? You want to protect that trash?" Mr. Lon stated with a threatening tone. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Lon. Gustav is serving his punishment just as you forewanted," Boss Danzo stated and turned around to head back towards the kitchen. "If you'll excuse me, I have work to do." Boss Danzo didn't even bother looking backwards as he walked into the building. "Oh, we shall see," the man stated and turned around to walk towards a red floating vehicle in the middle of the road. If Gustav was here, he would recognize the man who was one of the teachers in the disciplinary committee. "I wonder what those bastards have against this kid," Boss Danzo wondered as he stared at Gustav, who was currently running from pot to pot and putting ingredients inside them. The aroma of his cooking entered into Boss Danzo's nose, and he smiled. What a good lad. The school activities ended uneventfully again today. The environment became rowdy again as students walked out of their classes towards the school park where their rides will be waiting to take them home. Gustav recollected today's activities as walked towards one of the buildings he was meant to clean today. He couldn't find any one of the subjects they had today, substantial except for Miss Amy's. "I am close to channeling my bloodline past the 4th point. It only needs a little more push," Gustav said as he remembered that one of his classmates had successfully channeled his bloodline past the 4th point, becoming the first Zulu-ranked mixed blood in their class. Drail Godson was his name, and he was among the students who Gustav planned to deal with. Class 3 had several students that had channeled their bloodline past the 4th point, but Drail was the first student to do that in Class 3C. Gustav was able to sense his bloodline within his body from the time his bloodline got upgraded to F. He had been channeling it day by day during the middle of the night to make it move further and increase in quantity. Also, his daily usage of morph helped in the increase. He was only a little step away from channeling it through the 4th point now. Gustav was walking on the path that led to the mixed blood training hall. He was currently passing by the side of a pitch where some mixed bloods could be seen playing a football match. This was one of the mixed blood playing grounds. The mixed bloods couldn't mingle with normal people because normal people could get hurt due to their high level of strength. This was why mixed bloods had their own sports grounds located separately, where they played among themselves. Bam! All of a sudden a loud striking sound reverberated across the place. Gustav turned to look towards the left, and saw a blazing ball coated with fire heading towards his direction. "You kicked it in the wrong direction, idiot!" A loud voice shouted out from inside the pitch. Zwihai! The ball cut across the air in an arc with an astonishing speed headed as it flew towards Gustav. The speed was way too fast for a normal person to follow, but Gustav could see the incoming blazing ball. Gustav reacted by quickly stretching out both his hands with speed. Pow! The sound of collision rang out as the ball got trapped in between Gustav's palms like a keeper protecting the goal post. The force made him slide back a bit, but he was still alright nevertheless. SHHHSSHH. Mist was erupting from the ball and his hands as the fire went out. He stared at the students approaching with a cold look. Chapter 20. Mist was erupting from the ball and his hands as the fire went out. He stared at the students approaching with a cold look. The students playing in the pitch were heading towards him. There were about 7 of them headed in his direction. 4 of them wore a yellow sporting vest with white shorts, while the other 3 wore green sporting vests with blue shorts. They all had bulky builds that made them look like bodybuilders. "Hey, are you ALRI?" one of them wanted to ask when he recognized the face of the person who caught the ball. "It's you." The student who was currently in a yellow sporting vest with long blue hair pointed at Gustav. "Return our ball," he said with a threatening tone. Gustav held the ball in front of him with one of his eyebrows raised. "Is that how to apologize?" Gustav recognized these students to be from Class 2. Which meant they were his juniors. They were his juniors, yet he looked like the junior among them due to his size. Normally students of Class 3 will not be seen playing since everyone was busy trying to channel their bloodline through the 4th point. "Apologize?" The male student stared at Gustav with a look of bafflement. "Ha ha!" The 7 students suddenly started laughing hard after hearing what Gustav said. "This trash has the guts to tell us to apologize. Trash like you who only know how to use enhancements drugs don't deserve an apology," one of them voiced from the side. "Alright, since there's no apology, I guess your game is over." Immediately Gustav uttered those words, his hands on the ball clenched tightly. Pa! A loud bursting sound reverberated across the place. Gustav's fingers had pierced through the ball, causing it to burst. Gasp! How did he do that? Even with my strength right now, I can't destroy the ball unless I attack it with my full power. The male speaking earlier had a look of disbelief as he stared at the ball that had been completely flattened. This ball was a special type that was specially made to be stronger than normal. Its elasticity made sure they didn't sustain injury when they kicked it, yet it was powerful enough to withstand their kicks when they made use of their bloodline abilities. When mixed bloods played football, they made use of their abilities in the game, which was why the ball was coated in flames the other time. One of them used his bloodline ability to fire a shot. He must have made use of those drugs again. Most of them came to this conclusion after thinking about it. The student wanted to speak again when he saw something headed towards his face. Gustav threw whatever was left of the ball at the face of the student who just spoke. Pow! It was only a casual throw, yet it packed enough force to push him back. Arg! The student exclaimed in pain after the unexpected hit. He held his nose, which had a drop of blood running down it. You bastard! He spoke while holding his nose. Oops, my bad. I was just trying to return what belonged to you, Gustav said as he moved slightly to the left and started walking forward. Gustav passed by their side as he kept walking on the path. The remaining 6 did not try to stop him. You bastard, where do you think you're going? The student with the bleeding nose quickly dashed towards Gustav from behind. He swung out his fist from the back. Gustav continued walking forward like he didn't even know that a fist was headed for him from behind. Just when the fist was some centimeters away from touching the back of his head, Gustav suddenly shifted his head towards the left. Swai! The fist passed by the right side of Gustav's face from behind, missing him by a hairbreadth. The student didn't relent and continued sending out fists even after he failed to land the first. Shwai! Swerve! Shwai! Swerve! Swai! Gustav dodged every attack with ease and fluidness. The junior student threw out an enlarged fist as he moved forward. This time it was obvious that it was much powerful than before. Gustav, who had been dodging without even turning to face the student all this time, suddenly swerved to the left and stuck out his right foot. Due to his body moving forward with sudden acceleration from the heavy fist he threw out, he couldn't stop himself in time even after seeing the foot stuck out in front of him. Trip! Immediately his left foot collided with Gustav's right foot. He was sent tumbling forward. Bam! 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 He rolled repeatedly across the road before coming to a stop. Oops, my legs slipped. You probably should watch where you're going next time, Gustav said as he continued walking forward. The student gritted his teeth with anger while still laying on the road and turned around to look at the rest of his mates. You all are just gonna stand there and watch? He shouted out with a rage-filled voice. The 7 of them flinched. He's gonna use more of those drugs and I don't want to end up like Hung Joe. One of them voiced out the thoughts of the others. You bunch of cowards, he can't do a thing to us right now. If he fights, he will be expelled, the student on the ground revealed. Oh, so that's how it is. Now that they understood, they started walking forward. They felt that even if Gustav was to make use of the drugs for enhancement, he couldn't dodge every one of them at the same time. Gustav turned to stare at the 6 running towards him while channeling their bloodlines. One of them had dark-looking spike extending from his eye, which he dragged out and held like a weapon before running towards Gustav. Another conjured flames around his fist and legs as he ran towards Gustav. One made small metallic balls appear out of thin air. He placed it in his palm and used his middle finger to start flicking them out one after the other. The speed of the small balls were like bullets from a gun as they shot towards Gustav's weehee. Gustav moved to the left, immediately dodging the first projectile. Swerve! 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 Gustav dodged the projectiles cleanly once again. The others had already arrived before him with their attacks when he finished dodging them. Hiya! Hiya! They all shouted out as they attacked Gustav at the same time. Swerve! 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 It was as if Gustav had eyes at the back of his head as he dodged every single attack from every angle. The flames fist see every single attack was unable to touch him. Just like they said, Gustav couldn't attack them for now due to the punishment, since he didn't want to get expelled, but he had already thought of ways to deal with them without having to make contact. What Gustav was currently making use of was his high perception stats and speed coupled with agility, so he was able to accelerate and decelerate at any given time with ease. His perception allowed him to sense everything within a radius of 20 meters. This was why their attacks couldn't hit him even from his blind spots. Gustav dodged in a zigzag-like manner, almost like he was dancing. This bastard, just stay in one place! One of the students voiced out idiotically with a look of frustration. After dodging for a few more seconds, Gustav suddenly accelerated backwards. Vwum! His sudden movement and speed was something they had not expected since he had been moving at a particular speed from the start. The student who had his fist coated with fire already threw out a punch, and it was headed towards the face of one of his classmates, but by the time he noticed it, he couldn't stop himself. The one holding a dark long spike was currently swinging it towards the neck of the student who had his fist coated in fire, while a small metallic ball was headed towards his left eye. Bam! 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 It was too late to retract their attacks, so they ended up hitting one another. Kyar! Kyarar! Kyar! Cries of pain rang out as 4 of them fell to the ground while holding on to different parts of their body. The remaining 3, along with the first one to attack, paused their steps and stared at Gustav. Remembering the speed he displayed at the last second made them feel reluctant about resuming their attacks. We can't even touch him. Just what grade of enhancement drug did he make use of? These thoughts ran rampant in their minds. As your senior, I think I have taught you 7 a valuable lesson today. Come near me and receive boundless humiliation, Gustav stated with a cool voice as he turned around to keep walking again. They wondered what Gustav meant by humiliation when they looked around and noticed that they were surrounded by students who had come to watch what was happening. They were focused on dealing with Gustav so much that they didn't notice that they were already being surrounded by students. They immediately felt true humiliation. A type that seeped deep into their bones as they saw the disappointed stares of the students surrounding them. Dash. They couldn't even deal with one trash. Dash. They're all bunch of useless. Dash. They ended up beating up each other without him touching them. The voices of the students' ridicules were loud, making them feel like sinking into the ground. Now they knew how it felt like when Gustav was being ridiculed and humiliated day in and day out. I shall deal with him myself. A loud voice was heard coming from the left. Everyone turned to the side to stare at the person who had just arrived. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.